Chapter 1137. When he arrived, the central square of the illusory immortal city was already in chaos. Flowing lights fluttered about like countless blooming fireworks, and figures flew off in all directions. There were even white pieces of paper that surged with the wind in the sky but refused to descend for a long time, and people would occasionally fly over and grab them away. Gasp! Gasp! The entire hallucinatory immortal city was filled with exclamations like boiling water. Whether flying in the sky or running on the ground, as long as they were in a hurry, they would all have a white flyer in their hands. The bustling and crowded plaza instantly became much sparser. What was left was a bunch of wandering cultivators holding flyers in their hands. They didn't belong to any sect, so they didn't need to report anything to anyone. Yu Qianshou, who arrived late, was very satisfied with this result. This was the result he wanted. He flashed into the plaza and walked to the side of the sighing wandering cultivators. He cupped his fists and pointed at the chaos around him. "Everyone! I don't know what happened. How did it cause such a big commotion?" "It's you? I know you." One of them suddenly pointed at Yu Qianshou and exclaimed. Yu Qianshou looked at him and was startled. Before he could react, the other cupped his fists and smiled. "Did Sire forget? When the Merchant Alliance was attacked by Heartless Palace's consecrator Fang Yi, you also asked me a question." He pointed at the former location of the Merchant Alliance. "So that's how you know you gave me a fright." Yu Qianshou made an "oh" sound and immediately reacted. Recalling that he pulled someone over to ask a question back then, he slapped his forehead and said with a smile, I remember, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to be asked about you again." He pointed at the surroundings and asked, "What happened?" When the others heard this, they all sighed and shook their heads. That person handed the flyer to Yu Qianshou and said, "I don't know if it's true or not. If it's true, it will be very troublesome." Yu Qianshou pretended to take the flyer and recited the content as if he knew it by heart. "The three realms are in an emergency." Jin Tai and Bai Qi were unwilling to accept defeat. They were about to reopen the sealed passage to the demon world and release the demons led by Demon King Three Knight to invade the three realms. The world was in danger. I hope that the heroes of the immortal and netherworld will put aside their personal grudges and work together to quickly defend the 74 passageways leading to the demon world. Do not let Jin Tai and Bai Qi's plot succeed, otherwise the demon path will wreak havoc in the three realms, and everyone will be in a precarious situation. Yu Qianshou weeps blood and laments. After he finished reading, he flicked the flyer in his hand and handed it back. He looked at the others and said, "Can this be trusted? I heard that Yu Qianshou is in cahoots with Qintai. This is a serious matter. I'd rather believe it than not." That person took the flyer, looked at the plaza that had already become sparsely populated, and said, "If it's true, then the three realms will probably flow with rivers of blood. The demon lord of three knights will lead a group of demons here with resentment, and I'm afraid it's unavoidable that the three realms will be bathed in blood. He'll destroy all of the original major powers, and then establish a new order of the three realms under his rule. Think about it, if the demon path returns to the three realms and Demon King Three Knight doesn't allow his subordinates to obtain any benefits, he won't be able to give his subordinates who have been imprisoned in the demon world for so many years." "Exactly." Another person on the side nodded in agreement. He said, "For us wandering cultivators, it's not a big deal. Demon King Three Knight can't possibly kill everyone. If he really dares to do that, he'll definitely force everyone to unite and fight to the death. That'll be enough to make them suffer. What's more, the demon realm will have to leave some people behind to do the hard work. So as long as we don't get involved, us wandering cultivators will at most have to live a more difficult and lowly life in the future. What I'm really worried about are the famous sects that have taken over a region. Those people are used to being high and mighty. If you make them become dogs, it'll be more painful than killing them." The loud talk here immediately attracted some of the rogue cultivators in the surroundings to join in, and they repeatedly expressed their agreement when they heard this. Yu Qianshou looked around at the crowd and sneered in his heart. These people are really smart. They are really used to being dogs. But then again, when the immortal realm and the netherworld were in power, they did not treat them as humans either. Since they were dogs everywhere, to them, wasn't it the same to be a dog no matter who they were? Perhaps some dogs that had been mistreated before were resentful and could not wait to bite their current owners to death to vent their anger. Yu Qianshou originally wanted to take advantage of the fact that he did not know Yu Qianshou at this time to publicly commend Yu Qianshou's feat of not being afraid of power, because he was never stingy with praising himself. But looking at the situation, he took advantage of the crowd's indignation and quietly squeezed out of the crowd. This kind of speechlessness that was powerless to reverse the situation was not something people at his level could play with. If he had the time, he might as well do something more practical. Now that he had confirmed that the news had been spread, time was precious, and he should be busy with other things. As for what to do and how to save himself, he was now powerless to make decisions on behalf of the immortal realm and the netherworld. Under the dim sky where the sun and moon could not be seen, after the endless vicissitudes of the netherworld, the ancient and broken stone statue with the body of a snake still stood in the rustling wind. The plump breasts proved to the passers-by that it was a woman. She came from the depths of time, facing the Styx and telling the past that had been lost in the long river of history. Although it always attracted people's infinite reverie or ears to listen, no one could understand it, leaving behind some helplessness and a few eternal desolation. The arms of the statue with the body of a snake opened slightly as if to hug, and it seemed to be praying to the heavens for something, so dense snow-like pieces of paper began to fall from the sky. Ow! A long howl suddenly sounded, immediately attracting countless people in this twilight city to flash out. Immediately they saw the sky full of paper fluttering down. Many people grabbed it in their hands to see what was on it. After seeing the content on it, they were all shocked, and Twilight City immediately became chaotic. Many people gathered together to discuss whether the matter was true or false, and many people's first reaction was to report the contents of the leaflets. However, in just a moment, although these flying leaflets were already dead, they still could not resist the corrosion of the netherworld's death aura. Not long after, they all turned into ashes. However, for the people who did this was enough. They just needed to spread the news. In the large area around the Divine Ruin Realm base, not to mention ferocious beasts, not even a small animal could be seen. They had either been killed by the army of heroes who had been training here for a long time, or they had been hunted by the ferocious temple rainbow spiders. In short, the area with the base as the center had become a death zone for the ferocious beasts in the Divine Ruin Realm. This place, which was covered by clouds and filled with white mist, was the training ground for the disciples of the various sects in the immortal world. Now it had become the forbidden land of the Utopia army, and no one was allowed to set foot in it. However, the sudden appearance of foreign races could not be hidden from the people outside the fog, who had successfully cultivated and evolved into immortal beasts. In addition, Zhang Peng often led people outside the fog for combat training, so it was inevitable that there would be frequent conflicts. In the end, no one was a match for the Utopia army after several battles. Just as Zhang Peng's desire to fight was soaring and he wanted to sweep through the Divine Ruin Realm, the great flame mountain ape King Yuan Hong stopped him after hearing the news. He told Zhang Peng not to make a big deal out of this, or else he would offend the rainbow-feathered Lion King in the Divine Ruin Realm. When Zhang Peng heard that the rainbow-feathered Lion King's cultivation had reached at least the late-stage Immortal Emperor stage and that it had many powerful immortal beasts under its command, he embarrassedly suppressed the idea of expanding his territory. At this moment, nearly 10,000 battle-hardened heroes who had been trained by Zhang Peng had gathered. All of them retreated to the vicinity of the base, fully armed, and entered the first level of combat readiness. In the underground base, Yu Qianqiu had gathered the feudal lords of the various countries. He was displaying his ability in ideological work, explaining to everyone the dangers of the demon realm's invasion of the three realms. He also told them that he had already ordered all the human cultivators to gather at the treasure bowl, preparing to help the millions of human cultivators become immortals. He was prepared to fight to the death against the demon path, swearing to not let the pure land in the human world, which had given birth to him, be trampled by the claws of the demon path. Yu Qianqiu held up the banner of Yin Baikong, who would rather die than submit to the foreign races, and shouted passionately. His ideological work could be said to be very successful, and it was very encouraging, making everyone deeply understand that they were not completely powerless to fight back. Furthermore, Yu Qianqiu also vowed that if the situation was unfavorable, he would go to the Great Snow Mountain in the Netherworld to ask the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress for help and borrow 800,000 ice soul crystals from the Great Snow Mountain to help. He also continued to use Everyone's Backbone by Changchun to stabilize the situation. He said that if it still did not work, he would ask his master, by Changchun, who was in meditation, to come forward and turn the situation around. He vowed to fight for a foothold for everyone in the immortal realm. If we still can't win like this, we're not afraid. At worst, we'll just hide back in the Divine Ruin Realm. But I, Yu Qianqiu, am not a coward who is afraid to fight. I will definitely not be a coward if I don't fight with my life on the line. This was the last sentence that Yu Qianqiu said when he encouraged everyone. The whole thing could be summed up as a pre-war mobilization meeting. In reality, Yu Qianqiu was like a camel. If he had not been forced into a dead end by Yan Zhuixing, He would still want to take the shortcut to take advantage of the situation. Now that it was a matter of life and death, he immediately displayed his ruthlessness. He did everything, said everything, and was prepared to use all his resources and strength to fight. Fortunately, he had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years, but he did not know if it would be of much use. However, he had already made up his mind. Chapter 1138. To put it bluntly, these old foxes subconsciously took it for granted that even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. What was there to be afraid of? At most, they could just hide back in the divine ruin realm. This was the effect that Yu Qianqiu wanted. He had never thought that he could really make these guys risk their lives without any distracting thoughts. If he put himself in their shoes, he would not do that. Now, he was trying his best to motivate them to go to the battlefield with confidence. He wanted to maintain their morale before the battle and do his best to help them prepare for the battle. As for after the battle, it was not up to them. The reason for doing this was very simple. The messy rogue cultivators in the human cultivation world had long been gathered by Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. It was not difficult to restrain them. However, he or his Utopia army could not control nearly 1 million cultivators from various forces. The number was too large. However, most of those people were the subordinates or disciples of the feudal lords of various countries. Therefore, he needed to rely on the prestige of the feudal lords to command and manage them. Otherwise, before the battle started, he would be in chaos. De Ming Luan, Wei Chuanxiu, and Yun Peng looked at each other. They did not expect Yu Qianqiu to be from the human world and be able to gather such a huge force at any time. What surprised them the most was that Bai Changchun was Yu Qianqiu's master. Er Xuejuan and Ji Wu were also shocked. Although they knew that Bai Changchun was Yu Qianqiu's master, they did not expect Yu Qianqiu to be able to mobilize such a huge force at any time. He wanted to help millions of cultivators in the human world become immortals. What kind of feeling was this? Nongzhu and Lu Yanqing were the two who were the most emotional. Looking at Yu Qianqiu's impassioned speech to the crowd, they could not help but think of the guy who had fled for his life in the cultivation world back then. Now he had indeed become famous. As for Yan Zhuixing, he was even more impressive. He actually became the next successor of the Devil King and the current Vice Palace Lord of the Devil Palace. The two fellows who had fought to the death in the cultivation world all those years ago were about to have a head-on confrontation once more. However, the strength they could mobilize in the situation of the battle were no longer their personal matters, but the fate of the three realms. They didn't know who would emerge victorious in the end. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion. On the other hand, Ziyi, Farong, and the others who had been watching from the side, when they saw Yu Qianqiu's imposing manner of leading a group of heroes into battle, their eyes more or less sparkled with little stars. Ziyi suddenly realized that this man didn't look that annoying, and seemed to be quite charming. Her pretty face secretly blushed and she looked left and right. Fortunately, no one was paying attention to her right now. At this moment, a cracking sound could be heard from outside. Everyone turned to look and saw a very strange-looking person calmly walking in from the outside. They couldn't see who it was, but the person bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Master, I've come to find you. Everything is ready." Only then did everyone realize that it was Zhang Peng, the person in charge of this place. They couldn't help but look at the armor on his body with interest. Because Zhang Peng had never let them see such a strange attire when he organized everyone's training, they had never seen such a strange attire. First of all, the entire armor was very close-fitting. It was clearly tailor-made. It was covered with spikes of different sizes and lengths, and there was a matching long sword stuck on the back. Only 2 eyes could be seen, and there were some small air holes between the mouth, nose, and ears. It was an extremely strange appearance. The entire body of the armor glowed with a dark light. It was obvious that it wasn't an ordinary item, but a treasured armor that had been meticulously refined. At this moment, Zhang Peng gave everyone the feeling that he was a demon that had walked out from the depths of darkness. They wanted to use their divine sense to investigate him, but they found that it was impossible to penetrate. Only by using their divine sense to penetrate through the eye sockets and air holes could they see his true appearance. Everyone suddenly saw a person dressed like this appear. Before they knew that this person was Zhang Peng, they couldn't help but feel a little scared. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly to Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng turned around and walked out, while Yu Qianqiu looked around at everyone and said, "Everyone follow me out and take a look." Everyone looked at each other. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu wanted them to see, but they all followed behind Yu Qianqiu and walked out. When they reached the exit of the underground base, a sharp zhizhi sound suddenly came from above. A multicolored figure jumped down from above, and 8 light golden claws fiercely pounced towards Zhang Peng, who was wearing armor in front of him. There was a ding-dang sound that belonged to metal. Be careful. Someone in the crowd could not help but give a warning. The others also suddenly became alert, thinking that they had been attacked by a fierce beast from the ruins of God. Yu Qianqiu turned around and said to everyone with a faint smile, "Don't worry, it's one of us." Everyone was stunned. They saw that it was a multicolored spider that was as big as a table. Its 8 sharp claws and ferocious fangs were all light gold. If it spread its limbs, its body length would be at least 4 to 5 meters, and it had already hugged Zhang Ping under its abdomen. Zhang Ping turned around and glared at it. The multicolored spider immediately acted like a child who had done something wrong, and landed on the ground obediently. Zhang Ping flashed onto its back, and it immediately used all 8 of its legs to quickly climb out with Zhang Ping on its back. Only then did everyone believe that it was indeed one of their own, but it was a spider. When everyone walked into the valley outside the base, they immediately saw the big spider carrying Zhang Ping as if it was flying up the valley. Yu Qianqiu flew up in a flash and everyone else followed suit. There was a large group of people standing outside the valley. They were all wearing strange armor like Zhang Peng's, and they were faintly discernible in the mist. They stood silently in the mist, and their auras were like demons that had walked out of a nightmare. It was a very shocking sight to behold. There were even many people with a multicolored spider lying beside them. Its 8 sharp claws moved restlessly, but it didn't dare to move. Its restless and unpredictable claws seemed to want to break out of the misty nightmare and pierce into the chests of the people who were sleeping. Zhang Ping had already received instructions from his master in advance. He had purposely lined up in the form of a military parade to show off his family's wealth, in order to strengthen everyone's determination to not be afraid of a battle. Zhang Ping, who was standing on top of the big spider, suddenly waved his hand and pointed to the left. Everyone couldn't help but look over. Next to a giant snake the size of a small mountain, a giant frog the size of a house, and a giant eagle resting on the ground, there was a ghost-like person in black armor standing next to each of them. Zhang Ping then waved his hand and pointed to the right. The people who were already somewhat dumbfounded looked over again. There was a giant scorpion, a giant centipede, and a strange wolf the size of a horse with scales all over its body bearing its fangs. There were all kinds of fierce beasts everywhere, and every one of them was accompanied by a ghost-like person in black armor. These huge fierce beasts took up a lot of space and no one knew how many people and strange fierce beasts were in the depths of the mist. No one knew how much killing power these people and strange fierce beasts could unleash. Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to have such a team hidden in his hands. What they didn't know was that other than the colorful temple spiders, the other fierce beasts were all created by Zhang Ping. Ever since he saw the power of the 1,000 or so colorful temple spiders, Zhang Ping had led his subordinates to search for all kinds of fierce beasts that could unleash special powers and domesticate them, so that the heroic army could unleash even greater power. Hard work paid off and they finally had a lot of gains over the years. Now that they were being displayed in front of everyone, Zhang Ping couldn't help but feel a little proud of himself. The sturdy and indestructible armor, the strong battle power of unity, and the support of all kinds of fierce and poisonous fierce beasts. This team could finally show off its abilities. Yu Qianqiu swept his gaze across the people below and looked at Zhang Ping with approval. He nodded slightly and instructed, "Have everyone prepare to fight at any time." Zhang Ping respectfully accepted the order. After that, Yu Qianqiu led everyone back to the base, stating that he wanted to get everyone a set of extraterrestrial adamantine battle armor with extremely strong defense, which immediately made everyone excited. Thus, under Yu Qianqiu's guidance, everyone began to measure each other's measurements, and recorded their measurements in a jade archive before handing it over to him. Even Wei Chuanxiu and the others couldn't help but join in. Only Immortal Crocodile Ji Wu and Lu Yanqing didn't join in the fun. Immortal Crocodile wanted a set as well, but he was now a cripple, and his cultivation was sealed by Jintai's secret technique. He hadn't found anyone who could remove the seal yet, so it was useless even if he wanted it. Ji Wu, on the other hand, was a little embarrassed to join in. Lu Yanqing, on the other hand, wasn't someone who hated fighting and killing, so she didn't want this evil-looking battle armor at all. As for the envious Ze and the others, they were chased to the side by Yu Qianqiu, telling them to stay where they wanted to be. The girls had a temper, but they knew that this wasn't the time to be disobedient, so they could only go to the side and curse someone. After he was done, Yu Qianqiu pulled Nongzhu along and found the few subordinates who had protected Shi Wenguang in the past. He asked for a human skin mask that was suitable for Nongzhu, stuffed a silver ball into Nongzhu's hand, and asked her to go to the mystic immortal city to gather information. Because he still had use for the others, he had to bring them back to the human realm to stabilize the hearts of their own subordinates. Nongju was a commander without an army, and she was more trustworthy, so he could only trouble her. After sending Nongju to the mystic immortal city, Yu Qianqiu quickly returned to the divine ruin realm and rushed to the great flaming mountain to find Elder Nanming and Yuan Hong, telling them about the impending invasion of the devil realm. Taking advantage of the fact that the two of them were still in a state of shock and had yet to wake up, he took the jade archive with the measurements recorded on it and made hundreds of sets of extraterrestrial metal essence battle armor. He asked the two of them to put aside their private work of researching and refining artifacts, and to focus on the bigger picture and quickly refine these hundreds of sets of battle armor. Yuan Hong saw that his private stash of extraterrestrial metal essence was almost used up, and his heart ached terribly. However, seeing that his master, Elder Nanming, had already agreed with a solemn expression, he lost his temper and gritted his teeth to help his master refine the armor. It's so tiring to do ideological work everywhere. It's all that bastard Yan Zhuixing's fault. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, then returned to the base without stopping. He brought the hundreds of feudal lords back to the human realm and told them to disperse and return home. Then he quickly gathered all his subordinates and gathered them at the cornucopia. He had no other choice. Other than needing the feudal lords to lead his subordinates in battle, it was also because the task of gathering millions of people was placed on Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. It would indeed be difficult to complete it in a short period of time, and he couldn't just watch from the sidelines. Chapter 1139. Within the illusory immortal city, a destitute independent cultivator's stall had a few tens of various metal carvings on it. There were all sorts of lifelike birds, beasts, people, and things, and their exquisiteness could indeed be considered as handicrafts. This seemingly destitute independent cultivator was none other than Nongju. These **T handicrafts were made by Yu Qianqiu at the last minute in order to fool him, and there were a few hundred of them. In Yu Qianqiu's words, "I'm not really asking you to set up a stall to sell things, and you just have to make something to deal with it. Your main task is to inquire about all sorts of information. If I really get some good things for you to sell, you won't have the time to inquire about information when your business is booming. The more you can't sell something, the better it is." Of course, Yu Qianqiu didn't ask Nongju to randomly pick up a few stones to make up the numbers, as he was afraid that Nongju would be beaten up by those who didn't like him. Instead, he made some sculptures that were at least passable. At the beginning, because of the influence of the news that the devil dimension was about to descend upon the three dimensions, the square did seem to be much more deserted. However, it was also because of the influence of that news that the flow of people suddenly increased in just a few days. Everyone came to purchase things that they could use or might use as reserves in preparation for the upcoming calamity. The entire illusory immortal city was unprecedentedly bustling, and it could even be described as overcrowded. Not to mention the various stalls on the square, even the mountains of the various sects were filled with endless streams of people. All of them were in a hurry, and the atmosphere was becoming more and more tense. There were people stopping to look at Nongju's stall from time to time. Most of them thought that there was something profound about these sculptures, so they asked with interest. Nongju was truly speechless, and he could only imitate Yu Qianqiu's words. "This is a work of art that I meticulously carved, and there's nothing profound about it." In the end, he received countless supercilious looks, and many people scolded him for thinking too much about money. He'd never been scolded by so many people in his entire life. At first, Nongju really couldn't take it, but as time passed he got used to it. His attention was focused on the conversations of the people around him, and all sorts of information began to pour in. Speaking of which, the various sects had to thank Yu Qianqiu for using the teleportation function of the Golden Pearl to deliver the news in time. When the various sects received the news from their sects, they were all shocked. Almost all the forces that were close to the demonic world's passageway gathered there without any hesitation. They did their best to set up all sorts of restrictions at the sealed entrance to the demonic world to prevent the passageway from being opened. The most outrageous one was the one in the immortal world. Around the sealed passageway to the devil world, nearly 100 sects had arrived in time to set up countless formations of various sizes. As long as it was a formation that each sect knew, they would set it up regardless of the consequences. Even if it had been repeated countless times, as long as there was space nearby, they would set it up as much as they wanted. They kept setting up all kinds of restrictions. Nearly 100 sects set up formations in the sky and on the ground. It was a spectacular scene. As a result, within a radius of hundreds of miles, the heaven and earth were covered with gloomy clouds and fog. It was so dark that one couldn't even see his own fingers, let alone find the location of the entrance to the devil world. As expected, Jintai and Baiqi came here. Because they were in the immortal world, the sealed entrance to the devil world was naturally the most convenient choice. Relying on their strong cultivation, the two of them directly killed their way here. As a result, when they arrived, they were also shocked by the situation in front of them. However, time waited for no man. Wang Qing must have heard the news and came here, so the two of them directly broke the formations. Rumble, rumble, rumble. None of the formations could stop them, and they were forcibly broken one after another. But no matter how powerful the two of them were, they couldn't resist the fact that there were too many formations. It took them nearly a day to break through more than 10,000 formations and forcibly advance 100 miles. The strength of the two of them could be imagined, but they still couldn't see the shadow of the sealed entrance to the devil world. The two of them were immediately dumbfounded. They finally understood what it meant to anger the public, and they finally understood the power of the masses. Jintai was so angry that he stomped his feet and cursed Yu Qianshou. If it wasn't for Yu Qianshou leaking the news, how could they encounter such an unprecedented good thing? At this time, Wang Qing also hurried over. A six-dragon snow-blue sword forced the two of them to flee again. After they left, the hundreds of sects that scattered immediately saw that it was effective, so they immediately gathered again and began to set up the formations day and night. At the same time, they quickly sent a message to the other sections. As a result, the other sects naturally followed suit. Without saying anything, they directly piled up the passages to the 72 worlds with countless formations to prevent Jintai and Baiqi from breaking into the human world to open the passage to the devil world. The netherworld, which was shocked by what happened in the immortal world, quickly followed suit and piled up the passages to the devil world and the 72 worlds with countless formations. After this matter, the immortal world and the netherworld finally believed in Yu Qianshou's warning. Wang Qing even directly announced to the whole world that Yu Qianshou had taken great credit. From today onwards, the grievances between the Heartless Palace and Yu Qianshou were written off. And the various forces that were scared to the point of cold sweat expressed their praises to Yu Qianshou without hesitation. However, Yu Qianshou himself did not expect that the various sects could come up with such a method. He had always thought that there were too many entrances to the devil world. With just the power of Wang Qing and his son, they could not take care of the east and west. So he was still actively preparing for war. Nongzhu, who received this news, could not help but sigh. No matter what happened in the future, at least for now, it seemed that the boy really changed the fate of the three realms. Then, in view of Jintai and Baiqi's unscrupulous means, under the call of the king of the Black Mountain in the Netherworld and the Heartless Palace in the Immortal World, all the forces were mobilized. They patrolled their respective territories day and night, searching for Jintai and Baiqi's whereabouts. And for their own interests, everyone united unprecedentedly. At the first moment, they jointly formed the Immortal Underworld Demon Killing Alliance. The groups formed by the two realms deployed their forces as quickly as possible and divided their forces to guard the passages to the various realms. Once they found that the formations were destroyed, they immediately filled them up. Not long after, another piece of news came. Under the inescapable net formed by all the forces, they really found Jintai and Baiqi's sneaky tracks in the immortal world. However, they had no way of catching the two. After the two killed many people, they easily escaped. Then the two's tracks appeared again and again in various places, but there was nothing they could do. In the end, they were repeatedly destroyed and repaired at the same time. For a time, Jintai and Baiqi were exhausted, and Wang Qing and Wu Feng, who chased the two everywhere to put out the fire, were also unbearably tired. However, in terms of cultivation and speed, they were not as good as the two's ability to escape. They really could not do anything to the two who specialized in destruction. The two sides were in a stalemate. So, someone suggested that the passage between the immortal world and the netherworld should also be stacked with a large formation to reduce the area where the two could escape. But Wang Qing and his son knew that it was useless. Chapter 1140. At the Cornucopia Commerce's headquarters, the god of wealth peak that still stood tall despite the damage was packed with people. The various feudal lords had gathered all their subordinates, the Green Gang and Hong Gang had gathered all the rogue cultivators from all over the world. Even China's cultivation world, which had the largest number of cultivators, had no choice but to comply. In a short time, over 1 million cultivators from all over the world had gathered here, an unprecedented grand occasion. Amidst the bustling crowd, everyone was looking around, curious and nervous at the same time. Most of them had no idea why they were here. Several hundred feudal lords and sect chiefs were having a meeting on the god of wealth peak. Considering that some feudal lords only had a few hundred or dozens of people under them, while others had tens of thousands of people under them, and some sects of different sizes were also in the same situation, the merger and reorganization began. Over 1 million cultivators were divided into 10 corps, with each corps having a little over 100,000 people. The several hundred feudal lords were divided into 9 groups, with a few people in each group as the core of each corps. The remaining corps consisted of over 100,000 rogue cultivators, all of which were added to the Hong Gang and Green Gang, under the command of Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun. The Wuxia cultivation world was broken up by sections. Sects of different sizes were distributed according to the number of people, and they were all under the core subordinates of the lords of the various countries. After the meeting was over, the commanders of the 10 newly formed corps swiftly gave the order to count the cultivation level of their subordinates. One had to admit that Yu Qianshou used these people correctly. First of all, they knew their subordinates inside out, adding to their inherent prestige. Their work efficiency was extremely high. It took less than half a day to get a detailed result after counting over 1 million people. If Yu Qianshou were to do it himself, it would be hard for him to even sort out the people. After receiving the detailed data, Yu Qianshou immediately distributed 1 billion divine grade spirit stones to each of the 10 corps, throwing out 10 billion divine grade spirit stones in one go. A foundation establishment cultivator would need at most 1.4 billion high-grade spirit stones to advance to the immortal realm. Even if one were to start from the Qi refining stage, it wouldn't exceed 1.5 billion high-grade spirit stones. If converted to divine-grade spirit stones, it would only be 15 pieces. Each of you will receive 15 pieces of divine-grade spirit stones. An army of 100,000 people will at most cost a little over 1 million divine-grade spirit stones. The rest of the spirit stones will be used as management expenses. From then on, in the emptiness, they experienced fine winds and beautiful suns, drizzling rain, torrential rain, or heavy snowfall. Gradually, they would decay until the day the entire world would be peaceful and tranquil. Within the ruins of God, when the Nanming ancestor learned that his disciples had arrived, he personally came to pick them up and bring them back to the Great Flame Mountain. The commanders of the armies had no objections to this. After all, the Great War was imminent, and they had raised their cultivation. It would be bad if they did not have a suitable weapon. In the end, during a meeting of the commanders of the various armies, everyone agreed that it was not enough to just refine weapons. They should form another team that could refine pills to prevent the treatment of injuries during the war. Therefore, the people who were skilled in refining pills were transferred out from the various armies. When they found out that Guan Weiwu of the supporting Immortal Island had a past with Yu Qianshou, they were all sensible people, so they unanimously recommended Guan Weiwu to be in charge of refining pills. In this regard, Yu Qianshou did not express any objections. He mainly focused his energy on commanding the 10 armies in battle. When these guys gathered together to fight, even if they united, they would at most attack like a swarm of bees. They did not have the slightest military accomplishment to speak of. Among them, there were countless people who were crafty and deceitful. Even the commanders of the various armies did not have any military concept. They only knew that there were so many people under their command, and they were so excited that they rubbed their palms together. When they had nothing to do, they would ask Yu Qianshou when he could pull them out for a fight. This matter gave Yu Qianshou a headache, but it was not good to dampen their enthusiasm. However, if he allowed them to continue like this, they would sooner or later be taught a bloody lesson and suffer a great loss. After all, everyone's cultivation was not that high. No matter how many of them there were, they would not be able to fight against 1 or 2 experts. Therefore, Yu Qianshou had no choice but to organize the commanders of the various armies to watch a good show. Zhang Peng led the hero army and gave everyone a super valiant training. It was called obedience, invincibility, and invincibility. The power of team coordination was displayed to the fullest, and the commanders of the various armies were shocked. On top of a tall hill in the eastern Holy Land, several hundred people stood together and looked down at the nearly 10,000 heroic soldiers who had gathered together after their training. Their ranks were as neat as tofu, and a powerful killing intent lingered in the air above them. Several hours had passed, but not a single person moved a single finger. The commanders of the various armies looked down silently, and their expressions were very solemn. They all thought of the situation where their subordinates had gathered together. That could only be called gathering and not a formation. Not to mention the fact that the crowd was scattered and disorderly, all of them were standing unsteadily and looking left and right. When they gave orders, they had to rely on their profound cultivation and use the megaphone to shout wildly. Yet, they had been so proud of themselves for being able to command so many people. However, look at the commander of the other armies. With just a gesture they would fight wherever he pointed and absolutely obey orders. After a long period of silence, many people looked at each other in dismay. They all understood why Yu Qianqiu had brought them here to watch. This group of prideful fellows understood the disparity between them. They had been led here by Yu Qianqiu to be slapped in the face by reality. All of them were instantly ashamed, and they all realized the disparity in their ability to command. Everyone. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing at the very front of the hill, finally spoke. He waved his hand and pointed at the orderly formation below. He sneered and said, "Don't be fooled by the fact that you have 1,000,000 subordinates. Do you believe that I only need these 10,000 people to defeat all of you? And this is under the condition that they are not fully equipped with the extraterrestrial metal armor. No, I'm wrong. Your subordinates can't be considered an army. They're just a motley crew." A gust of wind blew and everyone's long robes became messy. All of them silently agreed with what Yu Qianqiu had said. After a long time, Yu Nantian, who was at the side, said in a weak voice, "Torture Master, you said it yourself. Our subordinates can't be considered an army. If we give them some time to train, they will naturally become something." Yu Qianqiu made a long "oh" sound. He turned around and looked at the crowd with a disapproving smile on his face. He said, "Then I'll wait and see. However, I see that you are dressed so elegantly. You don't look like someone who can train an army to conquer the world. You are good at seducing women. How about this? I have an idea. Shushin of Womanland also has more women in her subordinates and some merged sections. Moreover, most of the people in your sect are women. Moreover, it's really inconvenient for the division leaders to command if men and women mix together. Why don't we reorganize a division that belongs to women? You and Shushin can be partners." As soon as he said this, many of the division leaders couldn't help but burst into laughter. They all looked at Yu Nantian with ridicule. Many of them even joined in. "I think Torture Master's idea is not bad." T. Yu Nantian looked around and scolded. His face was gloomy. This was too embarrassing. However, it made the crowd laugh even harder. Shushin flashed out of the crowd and looked Yu Nantian up and down. She spat and said, "What's wrong with women? It's a good job for a man like you to mix with women. Don't be so shameless. We women don't care about you. Who do you think you are? Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror?" Yu Nantian sneered and said, "Of course. In Shushin's eyes, except for Nongzhu, who is a decent man, who else will she like?" Shushin immediately sneered and said, "Of course. Nongzhu relies on the nature of a man, unlike you who put on a body full of hair to pretend." Then she bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Torture Master, I agree with your decision to establish a division of women. However, Shushin disdains to be a partner with this man. Please transfer Nongzhu here to be my partner." Chapter 1141. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but think of Cheonghua Fairy, the head of the Moon clan who was under her command. If he really made Nongzhu fall in love with her, there would be a good show to watch. He really wanted to do that, but now was not the time for them to talk about love. He coughed and said, "In your dreams, do you want Nongzhu to have a baby with you?" Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. Yu Nantian laughed more happily than anyone else, as if he had vented his anger. Shu Xen bit her lips and raised her eyebrows. "If you really want to do that and Nongzhu agrees, Shu Xen will not object." Such courage made everyone burst into laughter again. "All right." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to stop them from laughing. It was enough to relax for a while. They couldn't keep fooling around at this critical moment. His face darkened and he said, "That's it. We will build an army composed of women. Yu Nantian will be the commander and Shu Xen will assist." Before he finished his words, the two of them lost their voices and said, "Torture Envoy?" Yu Nantian didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to really do this. It was so unreasonable. And Shu Xen didn't want Yu Nantian to be above her. Why should a man be the commander of a women's army? Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at them, causing them to swallow back their words. Then he coldly glanced at the crowd, causing them to be unable to laugh. Then he continued slowly, "This is not a joke. An army with men and women training together is a real joke. When we go back, the 10 armies will discuss with each other and adjust the number of soldiers reasonably. Anyway, we will remove all the women and form the 11th army. I know that many of them are husband and wife or are relatives, but I'm doing this for the good of everyone. It's better to let the men do the fighting and the women do the logistics in the rear. I think they'll be happy for the safety of their relatives." He had this idea before and wanted to find an opportunity that everyone could accept. Otherwise, it would be more difficult to command a temporary army with a family living in a team. Secondly, they would have a group of hostages in their hands, which would more or less make the motley crew think twice. Yunnan Tian and Shu Xian's faces became more and more gloomy. It turned out that they were in charge of a logistics team. The others had no objections to this. As long as it did not weaken their authority, it was fine. They all agreed to carry it out as soon as they returned. Everyone, there are some things that I have to say first. Yu Qianqiu looked at the crowd and said, now that everyone's cultivation base is about the same, it doesn't matter who is in charge. If the corps commander of any legion is not capable enough, I don't mind recruiting more capable people from below. As for those who have made great contributions, they will be rewarded with unimaginable benefits in the future. Who knows, they might even have the opportunity to establish their own sect in the immortal world. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly became heavy. Putting aside the matter of whether he could establish a sect in the immortal dimension in the future, if the disciples he ordered around in the past were to order him around instead, then it would truly be a fatal matter. Only then did everyone realize that they had boarded Yu Qianqiu's pirate ship. It was too late for regrets. After a moment of silence, Hu Changshou suddenly walked out and cupped his hands, saying, "Torture envoy. You also know that we have no experience in leading an army to war. I see that Zhang Peng is quite proficient in this field. Can we ask him for some advice?" Everyone's eyes also looked at Zhang Peng, who was standing still in front of the formation below. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across everyone's faces. Seeing that everyone's faces were full of anticipation, he was instantly delighted. This was the effect he had spent a lot of effort to achieve. If he forced them to train, it would definitely cause these guys to resent him. If they did not actively cooperate, then it would be big trouble. He tilted his head and suddenly shouted, "Zhang Peng." Zhang Peng responded with a yes, and flew up in a flash. Yu Qianqiu pointed at everyone and said, "Before the war, the training of the 11 legions will be handed over to you." Zhang Peng immediately accepted the order. After everyone returned to the Divine Ruin Realm, the core members of the various legions immediately surrounded Zhang Peng to ask for advice. Zhang Peng first explained to everyone the importance of the legion's hierarchy, then asked them to sort out this matter first. Everyone was smart and felt that it was reasonable. They immediately dispersed and hurriedly went to deal with this matter. By the time they came one after another to ask for advice, Zhang Peng had already divided the battle-hardened heroic army into 20 legions and let each legion lead 2 teams of people. One team would be used to train the people under them, and the other team would be sent to strictly enforce military discipline. How could a newly formed mob be so easy to train? As a result, on the same day, many of the troublemakers in the 10 legions were killed on the spot by the law enforcement team. In total, there were more than 10,000 people, and it almost caused an uproar. After all, everyone was now at the immortal realm, so there was no need to be afraid of them. However, in order to twist the evil aura of this group of repulsive people and get them on the right track as soon as possible, Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and sent Ming Luan, Wei Chuanqiu, and Yun Peng, these 3 immortal emperor-level experts, to patrol around. Yu Qianqiu's original words to the 3 of them were, "Don't be lenient, kill those who need to be killed." It was better for some of them to die now than all of them in the future. As a result, the 3 of them killed another 10,000 people the next day. Seeing that there were immortal emperor-level experts holding down the fort, killing them as easily as cutting vegetables, the mob immediately understood how insignificant they were. They were so scared that they kept quiet out of fear and became well-behaved. Their training was finally on the right track. In fact, most of these troublemakers were the subordinates of the various countries' lords, or people who were used to having power in their sections. Ordinary people didn't dare to jump around. As the training progressed, those people who usually didn't have the chance to raise their heads in their sects suddenly realized that under this strict hierarchy, no matter what your background was, as long as your results were better than others and you were more capable than others, the instructors would immediately give you a chance to be promoted. As for those who were mediocre, no matter how powerful your background was, they would immediately be beaten down. The rise of a group of powerless and insignificant people immediately set off a prairie fire in the 10 great legions. Those who had never had the chance to stand out immediately desperately seized this opportunity to stand out. As a result, the descendants of those with power and influence in the past were immediately unhappy. Those who were usually trampled under their feet were now bossing them around. How could they accept this? Hence, they all relied on their connections to find the lords of the legion's core, their fathers, or their masters to complain. The most typical example was Hu Changshou's son, Hu Yintian. Hu Changshou couldn't help but be selfish in the initial stages of the establishment of the legion. 100,000 people were to be divided into 10 divisions, so he made his son a division commander. Needless to say, Hu Yuntian was quite happy to see so many subordinates under him. The military rules stated that as a division commander, his words were like a mountain to the tens of thousands of people under him. They had to obey his orders, and those who disobeyed would be directly punished by military law. This was much more power than when he borrowed his father's influence in the Cloud Palace. These people were all under his command. Hence, both openly and secretly, he promoted the wisdom of the torturer Yu Qianqiu, and strongly supported the military management of the various forces. He also thought that since his father was the legion commander, it was only a matter of time before he was promoted from division commander to one of the 3 corps commanders. At that time, his authority would increase by several times. In order to facilitate his management in the future, he strongly opposed the original forces in the legion forming factions and disobeying the orders of their superiors. However, when the higher-ups began to send people down, he, the son of the legion commander, was demoted by the chief instructor during the training and assessment. He was demoted from division commander to company commander. In the end, the chief instructor said that with his current ability, he could only be a company commander at most. Imagine going from commanding tens of thousands of people to commanding hundreds of people. The difference was 100 times. Hu Yuntian was instantly furious, but he didn't dare to vent his anger on those heartless people. Hence he went to find Hu Changshou. In the end he was scolded by Hu Changshou. Hu Changshou said that his own position was in danger, so how could he have the time to care about him? After chasing his son away, Hu Changshou went to pester Zhang Peng to teach him military command experience. Similar things happened one after another in the early stages, but they received strong support from the majority of the people. After all, everyone had a chance to stand out. In just a few days, under the impact of the military system, the prestige system that the various sects and forces had maintained for hundreds or even thousands of years collapsed overnight. The various forces wanted to save the situation, but they couldn't. When they thought about it, they realized that Yu Qianqiu was too sinister. Helping him reorganize millions of people was definitely the stupidest thing to do. Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu would still need to rely on everyone. But now, if they didn't listen, Yu Qianqiu could kick them out at any time. Moreover, they wouldn't have anything left. This was definitely a huge scam. However, in the face of the tide, those who went with the flow would prosper, while those who went against the flow would die. In addition, there was no turning back. This group of people wanted to cry but had no tears. They could only compete with everyone else. The 11th division was made up of women, and it was the division with the largest number of people among the 11 divisions. Originally, there were very few women compared to men, but because all the women were gathered together, there were a total of 150,000 women, which was more than half the number of men in the other divisions. Seeing that many grassroots disciples in the other legions had become officials, these women were greatly moved. An undercurrent was brewing like a raging storm. At first, Yunnan Tian and Shu Xan didn't take it seriously. They could do whatever they wanted. After all, they were in the logistics department. So, this group of women was like herding sheep, wandering around aimlessly. When Yu Qianqiu started to cause trouble for these two people, he revealed that if they really didn't have the ability to lead this division, then they should be soldiers and let someone else lead them. Seeing that they were being serious, the two people panicked, especially Yunnan Tian. How could he accept the fact that women were leading them? They immediately asked Zhang Peng for help. Seeing that other places were on the right track, Zhang Peng transferred a group of people from the law enforcement team to help them reorganize. Zhang Peng was indeed very busy. Not only did he have to take care of the entire base, he also had to give lessons to the division leaders who pestered him every day. After the great Ming Luan trio who were patrolling around understood the cause and effect of the entire matter, they were sincerely convinced of Yu Qianqiu's abilities for the first time. Such a large conspiracy had been carried out in such a secretive manner. Unexpectedly, no one had noticed anything fishy about it. His methods were truly capable of changing the weather with one turn of his hand. In such a short period of time, more than 1 million people were trained into obedience. They abandoned their original deep-rooted notions of power and quickly and willingly accepted his orders. Moreover, everyone was fighting to join him for fear of falling behind. How many people could have such ability? Chapter 1142. Since there were no more violations, De Ming Luan and the other two didn't need to patrol around anymore. On this day, when the three of them returned to the base, they passed by Furong and the other women and heard them grumbling, blaming Yu Qianqiu for not letting them participate in such a lively event. Especially Ziyi, she pouted and said to the women, "You are all beauties in his harem. It's fine if he keeps you in his harem, but why doesn't he let me do this and that? It's so boring. Wei Chuanxiu, who was passing by, couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Little girl, that brat must have his reasons for doing this. Just listen to him. Otherwise, hee. I finally learned something. That brat's methods are really powerful." The women looked at him in confusion. Ziyi was also familiar with him, so she immediately pestered him and asked with wide eyes, "What did the big liar do this time?" You're right, he is indeed a big liar. Wei Chuanxiu immediately analyzed the things that Yu Qianqiu had done recently to the women. First, they used the invasion of the demon realm to scare the lords of the various countries. Then, they encouraged the lords to use their respective rallying powers to gather all the cultivators in one place. They raised everyone's cultivation to the immortal realm before bringing them back. Then, he used his power to lure the feudal lords and the original forces to help him straighten out the millions of people. Then, he tricked the feudal lords to watch a show, and made them take the initiative to ask for more training. Only then did Yu Qianqiu set up a set of design system for the millions of people. In the end, it didn't take long for the millions of people to completely change their views on sections. Everyone didn't take their original sects and feudal lords seriously, and only wanted to stand out and climb up under his system. Thus, in a short period of time, Yu Qianqiu completely won over the millions of people under his command. So many forces collapsed in the blink of an eye, and merged into Yu Qianqiu's force. Do you guys think that brat is a big liar? Do you guys think that brat is powerful? Wei Chuanxiu walked towards the depths of the base while shaking his head and sighing, "Powerful? How amazing. I've lived for so long, but this is the first time I've seen someone use such a strange method to control so many people. It's thousands of times more powerful than conquering people by force. If Jin Tai and Bai Qi had used this system in the immortal realm and the netherworld, they wouldn't have fallen to such a state, tsk. What they didn't know was that this was just their own analysis. To Yu Qianqiu, this was just going with the flow. Of course, there was no lack of scheming. However, from Yu Qianqiu's point of view, this system was just a system that had been perfected in his previous life. He had only roughly imitated it from his previous life. He had not designed it at all, and it was not as powerful and exaggerated as Wei Chuanxiu had described. Of course, it seemed to have a good effect in the short term, but as time passed, it would not be able to withstand the corrosion of human greed. Most importantly, everyone's cultivation level was about the same now, so he had only borrowed it for a while. He definitely did not think that it was as exaggerated as Wei Chuanxiu had described. However, for Furong and the others, after hearing Wei Chuanxiu's description, they felt as if they had seen a huge net that had been meticulously laid out step by step. It was like a monster that could devour the heavens and swallow 1,000,000 people in one gulp. Just thinking about it was too terrifying. They felt that Yu Qianqiu's schemes were too frightening. Immortal Crocodile and Ji Wu looked at each other, stunned by Wei Chuanqiu's analysis. Ziyi watched Wei Chuanqiu leave with her mouth wide open. After a long time she gulped and said, "Big liar, he deceived so many people at once. It's too scary." Beside her, the Allure Beauty shook her head slightly and said, "In such a chaotic world, a man should be like this. Otherwise, how can he achieve anything? This is not scary. It can only be said that his ability is something that others can't even beg for." Furong and the others also shook their heads to get rid of the terrible haze that Wei Chuanqiu had described in their minds, and then nodded in agreement with the Allure Beauty's words. It just so happened that Yu Qianqiu had straightened out the matters in the Divine Ruin realm, and the matter of arranging weapons for everyone was put on the agenda. He couldn't let so many people still use weapons from the human world to fight against the people of the demon realm. Before leaving, he called Hongqi over and the two of them walked over while talking. The mother and daughter were crying and saying that you killed Ma Jiugu. What's going on? Yu Qianqiu asked with a frown. Hongqi did listen to him and kidnapped by Hua Fairy and Yan Zixia, but the mother and daughter acted like he was an irreconcilable enemy when they saw him. They questioned him, saying that Ma Jiugu had no grievances with him, so why didn't he let her go? Yan Zixia was even more desperate to fight with him, but her cultivation was sealed, so she couldn't hurt anyone. Then she took the initiative to ask Ferdinand, who was guarding them, to forcibly take them away. Looking at Ferdinand's appearance, he was also quite emotional, and his expression was somewhat inexplicable, as if he was afraid that he would hurt the mother and daughter, so he volunteered to guard them. Yu Qianqiu had a lot of things to do, so he didn't pay attention to them at first, but before he left, he couldn't help but call Hongqi over to ask what was going on. Hongqi smiled bitterly and said, "Master, I didn't want to. Killing people is not something to be happy about." But that old woman stayed with the mother and daughter day and night. When I took action, that old woman risked her life to protect them. I remembered that Master said that anyone who dares to stop me will be killed, so I directly killed her. Right, I also killed a beautiful woman who turned out to be a toad demon. Don't worry, Master. Nobody knows that the mother and daughter were kidnapped by us. Those who know have been killed by me, and I have also disposed of their corpses cleanly. The last sentence sounded like he was bragging. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and said, Lan Bingxue was also killed by you? He still wanted to find this B*TCH to settle the score with Farong one day, but he didn't expect this disciple to make the first move. It seemed that this kid had been in the gang for a long time, and he was not careless when it came to killing flowers. Did you kill the wrong person? Hong Qi asked a little weakly. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand helplessly and said, Forget it. So be it. You go and do your thing. He now finally understood why Ferdinand looked a little weird. He probably knew that Lan Bingxue was killed from the mother and daughter. After all, the two used to be husband and wife. No matter how big the conflict between them was, it would be a lie to say that he didn't feel anything after knowing that the person was dead. Looking at the back of Hong Qi leaving, he shook his head helplessly and smiled bitterly. Just when he walked a few steps with his hands behind his back, he saw a group of women in the hall of the base looking at him strangely, as if they didn't know him. He couldn't help but be stunned and touched his face. He didn't wear a mask. He was a little stunned and said, What's wrong with you guys? The women shook their heads together to show that it was nothing. Zi looked at Hong Qi, who had disappeared, and asked weakly, Yu Qianqiu, what are you and Hong Qi whispering about? Are you thinking of doing something bad again? Psycho. Yu Qianqiu snorted. Just when he was about to turn into the passage on the side, he suddenly stopped and stared at Zi for a while with deep meaning. He wondered if he should arrange for Jasper Flower Fairy to meet this woman. It would be good to have a mother to teach her how to be a woman so that she wouldn't always talk nonsense when she saw him. But when he thought of Nongzhu's attitude, it seemed a little immoral for him to fan the fire in her backyard when she went to do something for him. After hesitating for a while, he temporarily gave up the idea. Zi was stared at by his strange eyes and then thought of Wei Chuanqiu's words. She suddenly felt creeped out. The other women also looked at each other. At this moment, Zhang Ping rushed in from outside. After bowing to his master and showing respect to the women, he reported to Yu Qianqiu, Master, I accidentally found Shi Wenguang's son, Shi Shaotian, in the army. He meant to ask if Yu Qianqiu had any instructions. He knew that Yu Qianqiu and Shi Shaotian used to have a good friendship. He vaguely remembered that Shi Shaotian had always called his master boss at that time, so he said this. Shi Shaotian? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Only now did he remember that he hadn't seen this kid for many years and had almost forgotten about him. He couldn't help but click his tongue and said, Hong Qi and the others really plundered all the cultivators in the mortal world clean. Even Shi Shaotian, who was hiding in the imperial palace, was pulled over by them. By the way, since Shi Shaotian is here, he should have seen me when he was in the cornucopia and should know that I am here. Why didn't he come to me? Could it be that there are obstructions? That's not it. Zhang Peng smiled and said, I asked him after I saw him. He seems to be a little worried that you won't recognize him now that your status is different. He's afraid that you won't recognize him anymore. He's afraid that something awkward will happen if he suddenly asks to see you, so he wants to see you but doesn't dare to. I've already brought him to you. He's just outside. Do you want to see him? This kid. Yu Qianqiu also chuckled twice, raised his hand and said, This boy was once a brother who went through thick and thin with me. Since he came, no matter how busy he is, I have to see him. Invite him to the conference room. I want to catch up with him. Zhang Peng accepted the order and left. Yu Qianqiu first went to the base's conference room while the women were discussing who this Shi Shaotian was. Farong, who had seen Shi Shaotian in the northwest barracks, roughly explained his identity. Not long after, a nervous Shi Shaotian was led in. He didn't dare to look around, but when he saw a group of beautiful women staring at him, he quickly lowered his head. He didn't notice that Hibiscus was greeting him with an expectant look on her face, so he followed Zhang Peng into the passageway. After Zhang Peng led him to the door of the conference room, he stretched his hand and said, Master is waiting for you inside. I won't disturb you anymore. After saying that, he left. Shi Shaotian looked left and right, feeling a little uneasy at the door. He nervously rubbed his hands together and finally gritted his teeth and slowly walked in. Chapter 1143. Walking lightly into the spacious conference room, Shi Shaotian saw Yu Qianqiu's familiar and warm smile at first glance. Shi Xiaoyan's tense heart had just relaxed when he saw Yu Qianzhou's face gradually surging with a solemn expression. His heart immediately tightened again. He respectfully saluted and said, "Punishment envoy. Don't be so distant. There's no need to be like this between us." Yu Qianzhou sighed and shook his head. Actually, Shi Xiaotian had misunderstood him. He just suddenly realized that Shi Xiaotian had changed from that inexperienced youth to a tough middle-aged man. He felt like he was dreaming. He thought back to how pathetic they were when they escaped from Anquangsung. In the blink of an eye, decades had passed. However, the Yu Qianzhou in Shi Xiaoyan's eyes was still the same as before. Other than the baptism of hardships on his face, his entire aura had changed. He was no longer hiding in his own house and didn't dare to go out. His appearance didn't seem to have changed much. Seeing that he was still a little reserved, Yu Qianzhou took the initiative to walk over and naturally put his arm on Shi Xiaoyan's shoulder. He chuckled and said, "Xiaodan, I didn't expect a pretty boy like you to become so manly. It seems like you've seen many beauties in your family's palace." Although it was a teasing remark, such a familiar action immediately made Shi Xiaotian feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He realized that his boss was still the same boss and hadn't changed at all. Thus, the big man instantly became teary-eyed. He turned around and grabbed Yu Qianzhou's arm and choked, "Boss? What are you crying for? You're disgusting." Yu Qianzhou pushed him away. He didn't expect Shi Xiaotian to still be that unlucky person who cried at the slightest provocation. He pulled a chair behind him and sat down. He looked at Shi Xiaotian like he was looking at a playboy and said, "What's going on? Since you saw me, why didn't you come to find me? Take a seat and tell me slowly." He hooked a chair with his leg. Shi Xiaotian felt a little embarrassed under his gaze. He rubbed his eyes, sat opposite him and told him the reason. It turned out that his current identity was already the state preceptor Yongzhen of the Wuxia Empire. After listening to Yu Qianzhou's words, he had never had much contact with the people of the cultivation world. However, when Yu Qianzhou ordered all the cultivators to gather at the cornucopia, he was a dignified state preceptor of the Wuxia Empire and could be considered a person with a little fame in the cultivation world. Naturally, Hong Gang and Qin Gang couldn't miss him when they summoned people. When he received the notice that it was Yu Qianzhou who gathered all the cultivators in the world, he was extremely excited and eagerly ran to the gathering. When he arrived at the cornucopia, he saw millions of cultivators, among which there were even many experts. However, these people all worshipped Yu Qianzhou. He immediately understood that Yu Qianzhou was now the ruler of the world. Although he was some state preceptor, he didn't even have the qualifications to speak to Yu Qianzhou. He saw Yu Qianzhou's several appearances at the cornucopia, and he also hoped that Yu Qianzhou could see him. However, Yu Qianzhou's eyes only swept past him and didn't linger on him at all. This further dispelled the idea of rashly looking for Yu Qianzhou. To be exact, he didn't dare to do so. After that, he saw Yu Qianzhou communicating with the heavenly thunder on the cornucopia to help everyone forge the immortal body. This made him tremble with fear and didn't dare to be presumptuous. It was also here that he accidentally met Zhang Peng, an acquaintance. Otherwise, it would be difficult for the two to recognize each other even though they were so close. The conference room fell silent. Yu Qianzhou didn't say a word. He had gained a lot and lost a lot along the way. As long as he continued to walk the path, such things would be unavoidable. Gains and losses would always accompany him. Shi Xiaotian looked at him silently. Thinking back to when the two of them were still working hard in Anquangsung, he never thought that Yu Qianzhou's future achievements would reach such heights. He didn't know that there was always someone better than him. After a long silence, Yu Qianzhou slowly said, "Xiaotian, you should go back to the human world." Shi Xiaotian was startled and then said anxiously, "Boss, let me stay by your side and travel the 3 realms with you." After coming to the Divine Ruin realm and coming into contact with so many people and things, he realized that the outside world was actually so vast and so exciting. It was much more interesting than being the imperial preceptor in the human world. Moreover, he had such a powerful boss to protect him. He hadn't even seen the immortal and netherworld yet, how could he go back? Yu Qianzhou gently waved his hand and said with a faint smile, "The outside world isn't as fun as you think. There's a price to pay for fun. You might not think so. Now that you have forged the immortal body, it's better for you to stay in the human world and enjoy your wealth. You and I are brothers, this is all I can help you with. Let's go. Don't say any more, I'll send you back." With a wave of his hand, Shi Xiaotian suddenly felt the scene change. When it stabilized, he found that he had returned to the back garden of the Pillar of State General's residence. However, there was no one living here now. His entire family had moved into the palace, and only a few servants were here to take care of it. Shi Xiaotian looked around and knew that it was useless to say anything else. He forced a smile and said, I didn't expect boss to still remember this place. Boss. Since you're already here, go to the palace and rest for a while. My father often mentions you and has been longing to see you again. I almost forgot your family is already the royal family. It's good to know the way. Lead the way. Yu Qianqiu said with a faint smile. Shi Xiaotian let out a happy sigh and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind. The two of them quickly flew over the bustling capital city below and directly entered the grand palace. Under a gold-plated Yongzhen plaque, Shi Xiaotian invited Yu Qianqiu to sit in the imperial advisor's mansion. The eunuchs and attendants were ordered by Shi Xiaotian to work around the clock to serve Yu Qianqiu. Those eunuchs and attendants secretly looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise, wondering who this young man was to make imperial advisor Yongzhen, who was second only to the emperor, treat him with such respect. Therefore they didn't dare to neglect him. Yu Qianqiu didn't have the time to slowly enjoy this ostentatious scene. He told Shi Xiaotian to stop wasting time and quickly invite his family to meet him. Shi Xiaotian asked him to wait for a moment and quickly ran away. The group of eunuchs was even more shocked. This person actually dared to order the godlike imperial preceptor Yongzhen around like this. For a moment, they were so nervous that they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. They waited for a full 2 hours. Yu Qianqiu looked around the grand imperial preceptor Yongzhen and was still wondering why he was taking so long. Outside the door, a large group of men, women, old and young had already arrived. There were more than 100 people rushing in. Some of them were even infants in the arms of the women waiting to be fed. However, all of them were dressed luxuriously. The people in the front were all wearing yellow dragon robes. One look and one could tell that they were the descendants of the royal family. Many of them seemed to be puzzled. They didn't know why they were called here in such a hurry. Yu Qianqiu immediately saw Shi Wenguang, who looked vigorous despite his old age. Behind him were his sons and daughters-in-law. He didn't know the men, women, or children behind them, but it was obvious that they were all from the same family. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself, my goodness, the royal family is indeed different. It's amazing how they spread their branches and leaves. Just as a smile appeared on his face, Shi Wenguang, who was wearing the dragon robe, was already in front of him. He was the first to kneel down and excitedly called out, Mr. Regardless of whether they knew what was going on or not, when they saw the emperor kneeling down, they immediately followed suit in fear and called out, Mr. Shi Xiaotian hurriedly stepped aside in embarrassment. The group of eunuchs and attendants were shocked by this scene, and immediately knelt down as well in horror. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, sat there calmly. He crossed his legs and raised his hand, saying, Rise, all of you. Rise. He also felt that he deserved this bow. He had given the greatest wealth in the mortal world to their family and saved their lives. It was not too much to accept their bow. Shi Wenguang immediately led a large group of his family members and stood up. Yu Qianqiu also stood up with a smile and walked in front of him, saying, General Shi, you are still strong despite your age. Congratulations. He was too lazy to change the way he addressed him. It's all thanks to Mr.'s favor. Mr. is still as elegant as ever, like a celestial being. Shi Wenguang can only envy you. Shi Wenguang was filled with endless gratitude. He was almost 90 years old, but he was still more spirited than his own descendants. He understood that this was the result of Yu Qianqiu's immortal elixir back then. He was even thinking of finding a suitable opportunity to ask for a few more. Yu Qianqiu smiled and turned his gaze to behind Shi Wenguang. There were 4 familiar faces who were used to a good life and had already changed their figures. There were 2 old men who were close to the end of their lives and 2 graceful women. He pointed at them one by one and said with a smile, Shi Yutan Shirin Tian Bao Wanshi Sidu Hui. Ah, did I remember correctly? Greetings, Mr. The 4 people who were called out were pleasantly surprised and hurriedly came forward to salute. When the 2 women saw that the man who had some entanglements with them in the past was still as young as before, their eyes couldn't help but shine with admiration. Among them, Shi Yutian was even more excited. He had always been interested in becoming an immortal. Back then, he thought that Yu Qianqiu was a celestial being and had always wanted to follow him to cultivate. Now that he saw Yu Qianqiu's youthful appearance, he couldn't help but feel his heart itch. Where's Madame Li? Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd and didn't see the mistress of the house, Li Hongyang. As soon as he said this, the atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Shirin Tian explained in a low voice, Mr. Mother passed away 5 years ago. I see. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and consoled, Birth, old age, sickness and death are the laws of nature. Everyone, don't be too sad. His words were pleasant to the ears. Why didn't he look at himself standing there with his youthful appearance? Who wouldn't be envious of him? Moreover, Shi Wenguang had lived a long life because of him. Once a person reached the peak of riches and honor, he would naturally desire longevity. Shi Yutian suddenly thought of something and hurriedly called out a group of juniors from the crowd to greet Yu Qianqiu. He even pulled their faces in front of Yu Qianqiu, as if he wanted Yu Qianqiu to take a closer look at them. In the end, the second son's daughter-in-law was also enlightened. She also pulled out her juniors for a walk. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the anxious Shi Yutian. He could see that this guy still hadn't changed. He didn't have the aptitude to cultivate, and he placed all his hopes on the juniors. Even the second son's daughter-in-law was infected. Chapter 1144. Not to mention that he didn't have the time. Even if he did, he wouldn't take away such a large group of cultivators in the human world and cultivate a new group for the royal family. He didn't want to embarrass Shi Xiaotian, so he perfunctorily told the group of princes, grandsons and princesses that the people should be the foundation. He also emphasized that if he found anyone who bullied the people in the future, he would personally deal with them sooner or later. After scaring the group of juniors into submission, Yu Qianqiu used the excuse that he was tired and drove all of them away. Only Shi Xiaotian, who was apologizing, was left in the hall. With his back facing him, Yu Qianqiu picked up a cup of fragrant tea and took 2 sips. Suddenly he opened his palm, and 2 golden tokens quickly condensed and appeared in his hand. He threw them behind him and said, "Look carefully." Shi Xiaotian took the 2 tokens and looked at them carefully. There were 2 sides, one was engraved with the word order, and the other was engraved with the word country guardian. The surrounding decorations were all kinds of lifelike birds and beasts. The 2 tokens were exactly the same. After looking at them, he asked in confusion, "Boss, is this for me?" Yu Qianqiu put down the teacup in his hand and took back one of the tokens. He shook it and said, "You can use this token as a keepsake in the future. I'll give one to you and I'll give the other to someone else. If one day someone comes to find you with this token, try to help them in a discreet way. You can only help them 3 times at most. After 3 times you can take back this token." Shi Xiaotian nodded and said, "I'll remember." Yu Qianqiu put away the token and said indifferently, "There's one more thing I want to tell you. I've always hoped that the human world will be the human world, and that the grievances between mortals don't need to be interfered with by others. This is also one of the reasons why I drove all the cultivators in the human world away. Next, if possible, I'll get rid of all the demons and ghosts in the human world so that the human world can be peaceful and fair. But I left you, a person who has already forged an immortal body in the human world. I hope you understand my good intentions, and I also hope that you are worthy of the 2 words eternal suppression, on this token that I gave you. After my wish is fulfilled, I hope that you can forever guard the peace of the human world, and not let any demons or ghosts in this world extend their hands into the human world." Shi Xiaotian didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to entrust the entire human world to him. In the midst of his excitement he found that Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. In a small town with simple folk customs in Wuxia, Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared in a luxurious mansion. He looked around and found that it was very different from when he left. On the basis of the old mansion, many nearby residences had been annexed. The old mansion still looked the same, but the new mansion with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters clearly showed the rich identity of the owner. Yu Qianqiu frowned and slowly strolled into the colorful garden. This was the place where he resettled his family. After seeing Shi Xiaotian's family in the palace, he thought of his own home, so he decided to come and have a look. As a result, he saw a rich family. A few servants in the garden saw a stranger suddenly strolling in. From his clothes he didn't look like someone important. They were about to question him, but they found that this person had an extraordinary aura as he strolled in the garden. He didn't look like an ordinary person, so they obediently shut their mouths. Not long after, a middle-aged man who looked like a housekeeper rushed over. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, then cupped his hands and smiled apologetically. "I'm the housekeeper of the Yu mansion. May I ask which new guest has come? Why haven't I seen you before?" It was still the Yu mansion. Yu Qianqiu indifferently said, "Tell Yu Wuqiu to come see me. Our master is in the reception hall discussing business with a guest. Please wait for a moment, I'll go inform him." The housekeeper nodded and bowed before running away. He had wanted to find out who the other party was. Why would someone suddenly appear? Even he, the housekeeper, did not know who this person was. However, when he thought about how there were people guarding the front and back doors, as well as the fact that there were also guards guarding the house, ordinary people would not be able to barge in. Hearing the other party's tone, he did not dare to be negligent. Not long after the housekeeper left, a fat man barged into the garden. He looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, but he was followed by 4 or 5 hedonistic sons of similar age. They walked in carelessly without a care for anyone else. A servant girl passing by bowed in surprise and called out, "Eldest young master." However, the eldest young master's scoundrel friends took advantage of her. She felt so wrong that she bit her lip and wanted to cry, but she did not dare to say anything. "Eldest young master?" Yuchencho raised an eyebrow as he looked at the fat man. He thought to himself, could this be my nephew? His gaze gradually turned cold as he walked to the center of the road with his hands behind his back. He stared coldly at the few hedonistic sons who had barged in. When the hedonistic sons saw that someone was blocking their way, they looked at each other and stopped. The fat man looked at Yuchencho with uncertainty. He could not figure out where this person had come from. He actually dared to block the eldest young master's way in his own home. Yuchencho could tell that although this fat man was a hedonistic son, he was also a shrewd person. He had learned to read people's expressions at such a young age. "I am the eldest young master of the U residence. May I know who you are, and why are you blocking our way in the inner garden of my house?" The fat man cupped his chubby hands and asked. Yuchencho said calmly, "I do not know the eldest young master of the U residence. I just happened to pass by the back door and saw that it was open. I wanted to come in and ask for a cup of water." The hedonistic sons were stunned. This was the first time they had encountered something like this. The fat man was even more suspicious. There were people guarding the front and back doors of his house. It did not seem like it was that easy to enter. At this moment, the housekeeper hurriedly ran back. He first bowed to the fat man, then smiled apologetically at the hedonistic sons who addressed him as Young Master Li and Young Master Zhang. Finally, he walked up to Yuchencho and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? My master said that there are no new guests in the house." "You do not have the right to know who I am." Yuchencho looked out of the garden and chuckled coldly, "It seems that I cannot invite him." "You really are trespassing on private property. Wu trespassing on private property can be reported to the authorities." "What authorities? Just beat him out of here." The group of hedonistic sons began to fan the flames. The fat man's expression immediately became twisted. He took a few steps forward and grabbed Yuchencho's collar. However, he found that he could not move it at all. Before he could say anything, he saw Yuchencho give him a slap at lightning speed. Bah! The fat man's body flew into the air. He had probably never flown so happily in his entire life. He directly crashed into the nursery garden a few meters away. Bah! The disorderly flowering shrubs immediately let out a miserable howl that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Yuchencho laughed coldly. It was already not bad that he could still scream. If it was not for the fact that he was his nephew, he would have taken his life on the spot. "You dare to hit someone? Let's go together." The group of hedonistic sons were very united. With a shout, they immediately rushed forward shoulder to shoulder. In the end, there was a series of pa-pa sounds. Figures flew everywhere. The nursery garden was filled with miserable howls that sounded like pigs being slaughtered. Just as the housekeeper went to help the eldest young master up, he saw the eldest young master, whose face was swollen like a pig's head, yell indistinctly, "Guards! Guards! Where the hell did everyone go?" Actually, there was no need for him to shout. A group of household servants who were guarding the house had already rushed over with their weapons. The eldest young master pointed with his finger and yelled indistinctly, "Beat him to death. I will take responsibility for beating him to death." "The son you taught is really promising." "Ah." Yuwucho was shocked. His elder brother was like a celestial being who could fly in the sky and burrow into the earth. Moreover, he had a group of incomparably powerful subordinates. Any one of them was a celestial being that mortals couldn't even beg for. His son had actually attacked his elder brother. Taking 10,000 steps back, there was no reason for a nephew to hit his uncle. Besides, in the future he still hoped to rely on this big brother to help him when he was in trouble. Yuwucho was really angry. He glared at his fat son and shouted angrily, "Unfilial son! Come here." The fat young master was so scared that his whole body trembled. He covered his swollen face with one hand and secretly pulled the housekeeper with the other, meaning to ask the housekeeper to come forward and plead for him. A series of slapping sounds rang out, and the group of good-for-nothings were all dragged over to kneel and apologize, causing the two brothers, Yu Qianqiu and Yu Wuqiu, to be stunned. The fat young master was immediately dumbfounded. He did not need his father to yell again. Without saying he knelt, kneeled and knelt said, "He not, Lord." Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood. This group of rich landlords thought he was an official. He was too lazy to argue with these mortals. However, he made up his mind to punish the people in his family. He pointed at the fat young master and said, "You, come here." The fat young master secretly glanced at his father. Seeing that his father was about to kick, he quickly got up and slowly moved over. "Which hand hit me just now?" Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "Take it out and let me see." Yu Wuqiu's pupils constricted, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. He'd witnessed his big brother's decisiveness in killing. Even though he was young all those years ago, he'd personally witnessed his big brother cleansing an entire stronghold of bandits with blood, and that scene was deeply engraved in his mind. Then he saw his son weakly stretch out a fat hand. Yu Wuqiu suddenly felt his throat go dry. He wanted to say something but he could not. Ah! A mournful howl echoed throughout the Yu mansion. The fat young master was already kneeling on the ground. He opened his mouth and let out a dry howl. His face was deathly pale. Yu Qianqiu had pinched his palm, and his entire right palm had already been crushed into a bloody pulp. Blood spurted out and splashed onto his friends on both sides. The group of foppish playboys were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground. Their faces turned pale in an instant. The group of rich landlords were also frightened to the point of trembling. They hurriedly dragged their sons away, afraid that they would also be killed. Yu Wuqiu looked at his big brother with a pale face. His son fainted on the ground. Yu Wuqiu's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. This was his son. How could his big brother be so cruel? However, he did not dare to say or do anything. Irrelevant people, get lost. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd and said. The group of rich landlords immediately cupped their hands and bid farewell to Yu Wuqiu. They hurriedly grabbed their weak sons and ran away. It was also at this time that a few women who had heard the news rushed over. The woman in the lead fell to the ground and hugged her unconscious son, crying loudly. Not long after, she also fainted. The other women called out a few times, but saw that the master was standing there in a daze as if he did not see anything. They then hurriedly called for the servants to carry the fainted mother and son away for treatment. "Find a quiet place. I have something to say to you." Yu Qianqiu turned around and said. Yu Wuqiu recovered from his daze and led his big brother into the old mansion with difficulty. After entering the main hall of the old mansion, Yu Wuqiu said bitterly, "My parents were afraid that you would not be able to find a place when you came back. They never agreed to let us renovate this old mansion, so they kept it in the new mansion." "Where are my parents? Are they well?" Yu Qianqiu asked with his back facing him. "Better than us children," Yu Wuqiu muttered. Yu Wuqiu muttered, "My parents are used to farming in Utopia, so they bought a few pieces of land at the foot of Nanshan with a few farmers to farm. They said that if you came back they would let you go over and take a look." "What? You think I was too harsh on your son?" Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked. Yu Wuqiu said, "Big brother must have his reasons for doing this." "I'm afraid that's not what you think." Yu Qianqiu stared at him and sneered. "If it wasn't for the sake of our family, I could have taken his life today. It wouldn't have been worth the effort. He has such bad habits at such a young age. It shows what kind of a father you are. If I hadn't seen and heard it, I wouldn't have dared to do this. Why are you and your son so arrogant? Do you really think that no one in this world can deal with you? It's good that you met me today. If you fall into someone else's hands in the future, no one will be merciful. Today I broke one of his hands so that when he does evil in the future, he will think about today's pain and have some scruples. At the same time, it's also for you to remember. I will remember Big Brother's lesson." Yu Wuqiu bowed and said. In fact, he didn't think much of it in his heart. He could be considered to be a wealthy man now, and he had made friends with many influential officials. He had never seen anything that couldn't be settled with money and power. As long as he had enough money and influence, nothing was a problem. Moreover, he had an unfathomable big brother behind him. He felt that his big brother had been cultivating for a long time and was out of touch with this era. However, he only dared to think this in his heart and didn't dare to say it out loud. Yu Qianqiu squinted and stared at him for a while. A fierce look flashed across his face. After some hesitation, he took out the token with the words Yongzhen engraved on it and handed it over. Yu Wuqiu's gloomy eyes immediately lit up. He knew that the thing his big brother gave him was definitely not something ordinary. He asked in excitement, "Big brother, is this for me?" Seeing his big brother nod, he quickly took it and carefully examined it. He then asked, "Big brother, this is?" "The Imperial Court's Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen owes me a favor. I asked him for this token. If the Yu clan encounters any trouble in the future, you can use this token to seek his help." Yu Qianqiu warned again, "Remember, don't use this token unless you encounter a disaster that you can't resolve. It can only resolve 3 disasters for the Yu clan. After 3 times, the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen will take it back. You must remember this." To a mortal like Yu Wuqiu, the reputation of the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen in the Wuxia Empire was many times greater than his big brother's. In their eyes, the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen was a true god. He was a person who stood above everyone else in the entire Wuxia Empire. With this token he could resolve 3 troubles. This was no different from the 3 death exemption tokens given by the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen. Yu Wuqiu held the token as if it was a priceless treasure. He said excitedly, I know. I heard that the reason why the current emperor was able to conquer this world was because of the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen's ability to cast beans to form soldiers. I've also heard from some merchants that the Imperial Preceptor Yongzhen doesn't easily interfere with the affairs of the Imperial Court. However, if he were to speak, he could even decide the next successor to the throne. Big brother, you have such a precious thing for me instead of keeping it for yourself. It can be seen that you still have our Yu clan in your heart. I was thinking too much just now. Little brother apologizes to big brother. As he spoke, he held the token and bowed deeply 3 times. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't expect that the crying Shi Xiaotian in front of him would have such a great reputation in the secular world. His Shi clan's world was actually obtained by Shi Xiaotian's casting beans to form soldiers. Then what did he spend so much effort for? However, it made sense. Given Shi Xiaotian's status in the Shi clan, he could really decide the successor to the throne. If Shi Xiaotian objected, it would be useless no matter who in the Shi clan objected. Looking at this little brother of his who smelled like a commoner, Yu Qianqiu sighed in his heart. He didn't say anything else. It was indeed not good for him to meddle too much in the affairs of the secular world. Otherwise, how could he convince the masses? However, he had transmigrated to this family, and it was thanks to this family that he was fated to embark on the path of cultivation. It was impossible for him to abandon the family and completely ignore it. Even animals knew how to repay kindness, so how could he be dismissive of it? He didn't want to meddle in the affairs of the secular world, but he had still clenched his teeth and created this token against his will. He hoped that it would protect the Yu clan for 3 generations. Today he had ruthlessly crippled his eldest nephew's hand in order to teach the Yu clan a lesson they would never forget. If the Yu clan cherished their fortune, they would naturally avoid using the command medallion as much as possible. In that case, the medallion might not only protect 3 generations of the Yu clan, but also 5, 6, or even more than 10 generations. On the other hand, the 3 uses of the command medallion might not even be enough for a single generation. One could imagine just how bad the character of the Yu clan was. Chapter 1146. Although he was not a good person in both of his lives, behind his great evil was a bodhisattva's heart. Using violence to fight violence, using evil to fight evil was his method, but he had never used the slightest bit of violence against any good people, nor did he do anything to make things difficult for them. He knew very well that the people who suffered the most between the rise and fall of the country were the dull and ignorant citizens. Perhaps he still had a conscience and always wished to do something for them when he had the ability. However, the affairs of the world were unpredictable, and there were some things that he could not predict. He did not know what it would mean for the Yu clan if he gave this token to them. Today he had ruthlessly crippled his nephew's hand because he had always been ruthless in dealing with the root of the problem. He did not have that much time to carefully teach his nephew, so he could only forcefully set things right. It was better to suffer for a while than to suffer for a lifetime. This had indeed taught Yu Wuqiu and his son a lesson. In the past 2 generations they had not used this token even once. However, the Yu clan's business had grown bigger and bigger. As the saying goes, wealth does not last more than 3 years. This was not without reason. With the accumulation of wealth, the descendants did not know the difficulties their ancestors had to go through, did not know the impermanence and dangers of the world, and sat on the wealth they had left behind. What trouble could they not easily solve? Over time, how could their temperament and disposition be as normal as a normal person's? When their mentality became distorted, they would inevitably do some evil things for the sake of wealth. When it came to the third generation under Wuxia, the expansion of wealth caused the third generation to become somewhat unscrupulous. Finally, he got into trouble. In fact, he did not provoke any powerful figures. He had only taken a fancy to the beauty of a general's daughter. The third generation did not care about her at all. Thinking that he had a good relationship with the general's superior, he directly raped the general's daughter. As a result, the general flew into a rage. The other party held military power, but he could not even protect his own daughter. How could the general endure this? As a result, he threw caution to the wind. He did not care whether the general was a superior or a superior. He brazenly gathered the troops under his command and carried out a bloodbath on the prosperous Yu clan. Almost everyone was killed, and the wealth that had been accumulated over several generations was snatched away. Fortunately, his old man had suffered a loss at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Since then he still had a lingering fear, so the family recruited many Jianghu experts. Coincidentally, at the time of this disaster, those Jianghu masters who had received his father's kindness desperately fought a bloody path out of the thousands of soldiers and horses for him, protecting him all the way to escape. As for his family and whatnot, he did not care about them. It could be said that he had received a great retribution. After that, the general did not let him go. He swore to kill him to avenge his daughter. He led the army to chase. Only when an even larger suppression army arrived did the general stop. Seeing that the entire Yu clan had been destroyed, the terrified Yu clan naturally wanted to take revenge. Thus he sought help from the high officials he had a good relationship with. Those high officials readily agreed. Seeing that the entire Yu clan had been destroyed, the ordinary people did not dare to say anything. When they saw that someone was leading the army to take revenge, they immediately flocked to follow. Coupled with some people with ulterior motives, an explosion was inevitable. The imperial court was afraid that the world would be in chaos. In order to stabilize the morale of the army and the people, a mere Yu clan was nothing. Now that the Yu clan's wealth had been scattered, it was even less of a problem. Moreover, there were people who wanted to seize the Yu clan's properties. Naturally, they pushed him out to appease the world. The well-informed Yu clan panicked when he heard the news. At the critical moment, he remembered the token passed down by his ancestor. Thus, with the mentality of making a desperate attempt, he took the token and went to the entrance of the palace to seek an audience with the imperial preceptor Yongzhen. The moment the token was revealed, it became extremely powerful. The imperial preceptor Yongzhen, who had long since left the secular world, issued a decree to summon him. This shocked the entire palace. This was a character that even the emperor found difficult to meet. After seeing the Yu clan and hearing that his surname was Yu, the imperial preceptor Yongzhen immediately thought of Yu Qianqiu. He then asked about the background of his ancestor. After learning that the Yu clan's grandfather was Yu Wuqiu, he was even more certain that the Yu clan was related to Yu Qianqiu. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Boss gave the world to his Shi clan, but let his own clan sink into the common people. This magnanimity was something that he couldn't help but admire. After learning about the trouble he had caused, the imperial preceptor Yongzhen only frowned slightly. He immediately issued a decree to the current emperor to exterminate the rebel army and the people, restoring peace to the world. Since this all-powerful ancestor had spoken, the entire imperial court immediately quieted down. With the fastest speed and highest efficiency, the army was assembled. Within a few months, all the chaos was quelled. And the Yu clan's third generation profited from the disaster. No one expected that he actually had the backing of the world's #1 expert. As a result, no one dared to touch his properties, and they all returned to the Yu clan. The ones who suffered the most were the generals and the rebellious people. The first thing the Yu clan's third generation did after obtaining a new life was to cherish the memory of his ancestor. He wept bitterly in front of his ancestor's memorial tablet and thanked his ancestor for saving his life. The second thing he did was to work hard to reproduce and make up for the Yu clan's losses. At this point, the Yu clan's third generation finally knew how to restrain himself. Because everyone knew that the Yu clan had a relationship with the state preceptor Yongzhen, the rise of the Yu clan was inevitable. By the time the fourth generation of the Yu clan became the head of the Yu clan's power had already reached the pinnacle of both the political and commercial realms. The result of this was that the hearts of the people were not satisfied. By the fifth generation of the Yu clan had begun to covet the imperial power. However, they were still somewhat apprehensive about the state preceptor Yongzhen. When it came to the sixth generation, it was terrible. That fellow was extremely daring and actually deceived the sovereign step by step, testing the reaction of the state preceptor Yongzhen. After seeing that the state preceptor Yongzhen had no intention of interfering, he brazenly plotted to collude with the throne. In the end, it did not work out. The sad thing was that the success of the imperial preceptor was also due to the failure of the imperial preceptor. This was because all the armies in the world were also wary of the immortal-like imperial preceptor Yongzhen. When they saw that someone was plotting against the throne, all the grand marshals of the army who usually listened to him immediately turned their weapons against him, and all of them sent their troops to protect the emperor. The result was obvious. However, the command medallion was put to good use again, and Yongzhen personally appeared to protect the Yu clan. This made everyone puzzled. Could this Yu clan be the illegitimate child of imperial preceptor Yongzhen? Why was he helping his own clan when they rebelled? As a result, the monarch was no longer the sovereign, and the subjects were no longer the subjects. Everyone started to look down on the sovereign. Only the sixth generation of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen could do anything about it. He ran to the residence of the state preceptor Yongzhen and cried for a few days, saying that he was the state preceptor of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen and couldn't help him. As a result, the state preceptor Yongzhen became gloomy. How could the descendant of this boss endlessly torment him? In the end, the state preceptor Yongzhen made up his mind and summoned the sixth generation of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen. He asked him, "If you want to sit on the throne, then say that I promised your ancestor to help your Yu clan 3 times. If you want to sit on the throne, then I will help you 3 times and fulfill my promise. However, you will have to return the command medallion to me. This is the only price you have to pay. Think about it carefully and stop tormenting yourself endlessly. If you continue tormenting yourself, then the world will fall into chaos." As a result, the sixth generation of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen bashfully expressed that he indeed had that intention. He was afraid that the state preceptor Yongzhen wouldn't agree and was too embarrassed to say it out loud. The state preceptor Yongzhen immediately felt a toothache. As expected of the descendant of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen, his shamelessness was quite similar to that of the imperial preceptor Yongzhen. As a result, he took back the command medallion and personally dealt with this matter. He called the emperor over and bluntly said, "The Shi clan's empire was actually gifted to us by the Yu clan's ancestor. My current achievements are also thanks to the Yu clan's ancestor. Now that their descendant wants us to repay this debt, we cannot refuse to pay it back. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to his ancestor. Prepare to abdicate, I will give you a good home." Just like that, the Yu clan finally fell into the hands of the sixth generation of the imperial preceptor Yu and successfully took control of the entire Wuxia empire without bloodshed. The first thing the sixth generation of the imperial preceptor Yu did was the same as the third generation of the imperial preceptor Yu. However, he brought a group of descendants to kneel in front of the ancestral tablets and cried bitterly, thanking the ancestors for their great kindness. After going through all the ancestral tablets, one would realize that Yu Qianzhou's name was nowhere to be seen. There was nothing to do with Yu Qianzhou. Meanwhile, imperial preceptor Yongzhen gathered all the descendants of the Shi clan together. There were tens of thousands of them and they were all brought to the Eastern Holy Land to start a new life there. After fulfilling the 3 promises, imperial preceptor Yongzhen actually heaved a sigh of relief. All these years he had been bound by the 3 promises on the command medallion. That was why he had been staying in that boring imperial palace, waiting for the person who brought the command medallion to find him. He was afraid that his departure would delay his boss's matters. After fulfilling the promise, imperial preceptor Yongzhen floated away in the vast world. The descendants of the Shi clan also didn't know where he went. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou didn't know what would happen next. If he knew, he might not have given the command medallion away. Yu Wuqiu, who was bowing to thank his big brother, suddenly heard a commotion. He raised his head and saw that his big brother was no longer there. Instead, he saw his wife barging in with a group of people. He couldn't help but feel furious. Right now, he was so regretful that his intestines were turning green. If it wasn't for the fact that he had gotten used to those beautiful sword-wielding beauties back in Utopia and had such a wonderful impression of them, he wouldn't have fallen in love with this woman at first sight. After tasting her, he realized that she was simply too shrewish. She would always bring weapons out to fight for her life. Just looking at her made his head hurt. "Where is the person who attacked my son? Get him to come out." The shrewd woman who barged in with a sword roared angrily. With a wave of her hand, a group of servants who were also holding weapons started searching for the person in the old residence. "Pa!" Yu Wuqiu walked over and gave her a slap. He pointed at his stunned wife and scolded, "Is that someone you can scold? If you keep making noise, I'll divorce you." He also looked around, afraid that his big brother would be in trouble if he heard what his wife said. Unexpectedly, his wife didn't appreciate his kindness. She stomped her feet and cried, "How dare you hit me? I'll fight you to the death." She raised her sword and chased after him, causing Yu Wucho to run around. A group of servants quickly came over to stop the fight. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu had already arrived at the foot of the southern mountain outside the town. He landed in a large thicket behind a house that was obviously much more luxurious than the houses of the surrounding farmers. He swept his gaze across the surrounding fields and saw an old couple in coarse clothes returning from the fields. He couldn't help but freeze. The man had a hoe on his shoulder, and the woman had a bamboo basket on her waist that contained some fresh vegetables. The two of them chatted and laughed along the way, looking very healthy. They even helped each other cross the ditches in the fields from time to time. After seeing the old couple enter the house, Yu Qianqiu still didn't move. After listening to the conversation in the house, he couldn't help but smile. When the sound of pots and pans could be heard, and smoke began to billow out from the chimney, he felt that the matters of the secular world had been resolved with the billowing smoke. Yu Qianqiu's gaze suddenly looked towards the distant horizon, and gradually became fierce. He had already made up his mind. He wouldn't tolerate anyone disturbing this pure land of the mortal world, not even the supreme of the demon world, Demon King Three Knights. The leaves gently swayed and the people in the thicket had already disappeared. Over the ditches that the old couple had crossed, there were now stone bridges that were very sturdy and exquisite. Chapter 1147. Those who attacked from the dark had more or less an advantage, and the methods they could choose were more than those who defended passively. After Jintai and Baiqi ran around for a while, they had already grasped the general situation of the netherworld and celestial world. The two of them immediately took action. First, they joined hands to cause a ruckus in the celestial world, destroying several large sects and causing panic among the sects in the celestial world. Suddenly, they took the risk to attack the headquarters of the Passionless Palace, almost razing the entire headquarters to the ground. The enraged Wang Qing chased after them all the way, but he was actually lured into the underworld by the two of them. Wu Feng, who heard the news, immediately came to help. After a fierce battle, Jin Tai and Baiqi pretended to be injured and fled. Wang Qing and his son saw the two of them were injured, and immediately became spirited. They chased them in the netherworld, looking like they wanted to take advantage of the two of them being injured to get rid of them. With the annihilation of the Purgatory Army and the retreat of the Red Armored Army, the Endless Horizon, the place that caused all living beings in the netherworld to tremble, had long since changed. There was only lava flowing everywhere. A few flowing lights flew past the endless horizon, and the enemies that were faintly discernible were about to escape into the mysterious forbidden area. Wu Feng, who was chasing them, laughed sharply and shouted angrily, "Jintai Baiqi! The mysterious forbidden area is in front, you have nowhere to run, today is the day you die." "The day we die?" Jintai's wild laughter came from afar. "Ignorant fools, I'll let you and your son be happy for a few days, there will be time for you to cry." Wang Qing, who was flying quickly behind Wu Feng, suddenly frowned and said, "Father, why do I feel that something is wrong? Why can't I see Baiqi? That guy has always been known for his speed, naturally he ran faster than Jin Tai." Wu Feng's voice suddenly paused and he stopped in the air. Amidst the rolling heat waves and the soaring red light, he shouted, "Not good. We've fallen into the trap of these two scoundrels." Wang Qing's expression changed. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to understand something and quickly turned back. The father and son looked at each other silently for a while, and their faces gradually turned pale. Without saying a word, they turned around and flew back almost without hesitation. "Haha." Jin Tai's arrogant laughter came from afar again. "It's too late for you to understand now." A streak of golden light was reflected back, and it chased after the father and son at an even faster speed. Golden light flashed from its body, and its disheveled golden robes were completely refurbished, and it didn't appear that it had been injured in the slightest. Suddenly, the sky above the underworld rumbled unceasingly, and the fierce sound of fighting constantly resounded between heaven and earth. Jin Tai relied on his faster speed to continuously chase after Wang Qing and his son. When the father and son attacked, he immediately turned around and fled. At this time, anyone could see that Jin Tai was stalling for time. On the way, Wu Feng finally received an urgent message from his sister, Lady Blackpool. She said that Bai Qi was on a killing spree at the exit between the underworld and the celestial world. No one could stop him. Now no one dared to go near that area. She asked the father and son to quickly go and help. This confirmed the father and son's guess. Jintai and Bai Qi had pretended to be injured and set up a trap to lure the father and son. Then Bai Qi would use his faster speed to quickly open the passage to the demon world, and Jintai would stall them to buy more time for Bai Qi. However, what the father and son could not understand was that since Bai Qi had already reached the exit between the two realms, why didn't he hurry to open the passage to the demon world? Why was he wasting time by killing people at the exit? With Bai Qi's cultivation, if the father and son were stalled here, who could stop Bai Qi from opening the passage to the demon world? Once he thought of this, he didn't have time to think about anything else. He used all his strength to defeat Queen Jean and immediately said anxiously, "Father, every passage to the demon world is blocked by many formations. Even if Bai Qi wants to open the passage to the demon world, he won't be able to do so in a short period of time. Your flying speed is faster than mine, so quickly chase after Bai Qi. There's still time. I will stall Jintai. Go quickly." "All right." Wu Feng shouted and quickly disappeared into the distance with the wind god's staff. Wang Qing turned around and chased after Jintai. "Trying to run? It won't be that easy." Jintai laughed evilly. He did not want to fight with Wang Qing at all. He quickly dodged Wang Qing and used his even faster speed to tangle with Wu Feng. His golden cloud rod shone brightly as it smashed towards Wu Feng. Wu Feng, who had to fight back, was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Time waits for no man. But he had no choice but to block. When Wang Qing caught up again, he shouted angrily, "You go. I'll stop him." Wang Qing's expression was serious as he flew past the two fighting. However, after fighting for a while, Jintai immediately avoided Wu Feng and chased after Wang Qing again. Just like this, the father and son were forced to fight with Jintai. They had to block as they rushed. However, Jintai's cultivation was too high and he couldn't do anything to him. Jintai wasted a lot of time. When the father and son finally arrived at the passage between the underworld and the celestial world, they found that a large area of the passage was blocked by fog. A group of people were trying their best to break the formation. The rumbling caused the ground to tremble continuously. However, how could the hundreds of formations that Bai Qi had personally set up be compared to the motley crew? The group of people only broke through a dozen formations after a whole day. "Wow, Bai Qi, you're really something. You're giving them a taste of their own medicine." Looking at this, Jintai laughed wildly. Their plan was to make use of the time difference. That was why they deliberately lured Wang Qing and his son to a remote area of the underworld so that Bai Qi could rely on his speed to buy more time to open the passage to the demon world. However, what Jintai didn't expect was that Bai Qi would come up with a stroke of genius on the spot. He learned from the people of the immortal realm and netherworld and set up a large number of great arrays on the passageway between the two realms. In turn, he blocked the pursuit of Wang Qing and his son. Seeing this, the stone in Jintai's heart fell to the ground. If it was as he expected, Bai Qi should have also set up many formations on the side of the celestial world to stop them. This way, opening the passage to the demon world would not have any more twists and turns. It should be in the bag. How could he not be happy? "Stop him. I'll break the formation." Wu Feng shouted angrily. Wang Qing turned around and charged at the arrogant Jintai. The latter immediately stood not too far away, clearly wanting to continue to delay one of the father and son, not letting them work together to break the formation. A huge staff flew into the night sky, like a meteor falling from the sky. It smashed into the depths of the white mist with a boom. The ground shook violently. The people who were originally surrounding this place to break the formation did not expect Wu Feng to attack without even giving them a warning. They were so scared that they scattered like birds and beasts to avoid being accidentally injured. No matter how powerful the defensive power of the formation that Bai Qi had set up was, it could not withstand a single strike from the divine wind staff. With a single strike, the formation was broken. The divine wind staff shot up into the sky again, turning into a speck of starlight that grew larger and larger before crashing down again. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Half a day later, the mist finally dispersed and the hundreds of formations were finally broken. "Wang Qing, you guard the passage, don't let that traitor come and cause trouble." Wu Feng screamed and grabbed the wind god's staff, shooting into the spinning black light. However, what he didn't expect was that the moment he came out of the passage, he immediately saw the twisting power of the world spinning towards him. It was terrifyingly strong. Wu Feng was shocked and immediately understood that Bai Qi had laid down a killing formation to wait for him. In a moment of panic, he almost fell for it. Luckily, the treasure in his hand was the wind god's staff. With an angry shout, a ball of abominable black wind suddenly exploded, dispersing the huge killing force. The wind god's staff rapidly expanded, and with a boom, it directly pierced through the entire mountain, breaking apart the formation and the mountain. His figure flew out along the white light above his head and came out of the mountain. He saw the dense mist formation again, and there were still rumbling sounds outside. Clearly, there were also people breaking the formation outside. Wu Feng pointed towards the sky without hesitation. The enormous wind god's staff was like an enormous wind drill that spun rapidly and drilled into the white mist above his head. Rumble. Rumble. A series of explosions rang out. After another half a day, the fog dispersed, and another 100 or so formations were broken. Wu Feng flew into the air and grabbed the wind god's staff. Ignoring the dumbfounded crowd around him, he headed straight for the Immortal World's Devil World's tunnel. Bai Qi, who had killed his way here, had already reached the outskirts of the passage to the Demon World 3 days earlier. At this time, the obsidian light mirror in his hand was exploding with uneven black light, clearing away the messy formations along the way. For more than a day, the obsidian light mirror had not stopped operating. In the distance, a large group of people were watching this scene in a daze. However, Bai Qi's cultivation base was too high for them. They were no match for him at all. Rushing forward would be suicide. Some of the people who had rushed forward regardless of the cost were directly turned into ashes by the obsidian nether light mirror in Bai Qi's hand. No one dared to move recklessly. They could only watch helplessly, not knowing what to do. Emperor of the Underworld, quickly stop. Once the demon world is opened, you know better than us what the consequences will be. Someone shouted with tears of blood. As long as you are willing to give up on opening the passage to the demon world, we are willing to restore the original order of the celestial world and the netherworld, and worship you forever. Yes, yes. Countless people shouted, Emperor of the Underworld, quickly stop. Bai Qi's expression changed as if he was moved. If he was not forced, he would not want to open the demon world again. However, he instantly calmed down, and his indifferent voice resounded through the sky. Wait until you can be the master of Wu Feng and Wang Qing, then say such words to me. Otherwise, it is no different from farting. Who can truly understand what I have done for the 3 realms for so many years? In the end, aren't you going against me just because you say so? Ah, I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me. Why not kill all the heartless people? His voice was filled with grief and anger. The black light suddenly soared, breaking the few magic formations with all its power. A huge mountain with a steel inlaid on it appeared in the mist. Under the illumination of the black light, the accumulated dust and vines on the steel were all swept away. Dense and strange magic symbols were engraved on the steel. Seal of the demon world. A wave of terrified exclamations came from the crowd in the distance. There were still many formations that had not been broken behind the large mountain and on both sides, but those were not important. At this time, Bai Qi could not hear the urgent shouts behind him, nor could he see the formations that had not been broken. In his eyes, there was only the metal steel, and the speed at which his chest rose and fell became somewhat hurried. Chapter 1148. In the hallucinatory immortal city, Yu Qianqiu, who was disguised as Niu Yud, casually walked to Nongzhu's stall. He picked up a horse sculpture and clicked his tongue. Oh my God! There was actually such a marvelous sculpture in this world. He wondered which extraordinary person had created it. Boss, how many spirit stones are you selling it for? He smiled wretchedly. Nongzhu looked at him as if he was a dead man. She sat there motionlessly and said, It is rare to see a man like you. Why don't you tell me what's so good about the things in my stall? If you really know what's good about them, I will give them to you for free. His words seemed to be saying, praise me as much as you can. I want to see what you can boast about. Yu Qianqiu could see that this old handsome man had a problem with him. Forget it, he would not argue with him now. He would ask Jade Flower Fairy to deal with him when he returned. Just when he was about to say something to comfort him, there was a sudden commotion in the square. Looking back, he found that many disciples of the Heartless Palace had come to the square and were talking passionately. What's going on? Yu Qianqiu held the horse sculpture in his arms and got back to business. However, he was transmitting his voice secretly. Nongzhu also understood that it was not the time to be angry. She explained angrily, after the Immortal Underworld and the Underworld established the Immortal Underworld Demon-Slaying Alliance, the Heartless Palace established the Rogue Cultivators Alliance from all over the Immortal World. The gimmick was that they took out a quota of 1,000 true disciples of the Heartless Palace and prepared to reward them to the rogue cultivators who made great contributions to the immortal underworld demon-slaying alliance. It was said that the rogue cultivators who made great contributions could join the Heartless Palace and practice the sword-drawing movement of the Heartless Palace. Once this gimmick was taken out, the rogue cultivators in the immortal world rushed to join. I heard that 2 to 3 million people have been gathered to compete for the 1,000 quota. The Rogue Cultivators Alliance? Yuchensho was startled. He was quite familiar with this name. He had once been the leader of the Rogue Cultivator Alliance in the cultivation world, so he didn't find it strange that these rogue cultivators would flock to him like a flock of ducks. He nodded slightly and said, "Independent cultivators do not have a good life. Being able to join the Heartless Palace and obtain the true legacy of the Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique is indeed a chance to change one's fate. If it were me, I would take the gamble. Anyway, no one knows you now. You can give it a try," Nongju said sarcastically. Yuchensho caressed the horse sculpture in his arms and chuckled, "Forget it. If the people from the Heartless Palace know it's me, don't fight me to the death." "Oh." Nongju made a long "oh" sound and said, "I forgot to tell you something. Wang Qing has publicly announced that the grudge between you and the Heartless Palace has been written off." He told Nongju about how Yuchensho called the police in time and resolved the crisis. Then Wang Qing told him about how he took credit for the incident and what he heard recently. "Is there such a good thing?" Yuchensho was stunned. He looked around and said, "That's what I said. Looking at the situation in the hallucination immortal city, I know that Jintai and Baichi have not succeeded. Otherwise, the hallucination immortal city would not be so lively when the diabolism came. That's why I said you can give it a try. It's not bad to get the sword-drawing technique of the Heartless Palace." Nongju teased. "Come on. How could the Heartless Palace divulge the cultivation method of the sword-drawing technique so easily? At most, they only divulged the first technique. But now, I can buy some things in the hallucination immortal city and exchange all the things that those people in the human world have. You really brought all the cultivators in the human world here?" Nongju was stunned. Yuchensho replied with an N. He put down the horse sculpture in his hand and walked into the crowd. He started to buy all the cheap things in the stalls. After all, no matter how cheap they were still better than the ordinary things in the human world. The key was that it was not practical to buy a lot of high-grade things. Moreover, millions of people were using high-grade things and he did not have the financial resources to do so. He could only make do with what he had. After he bought thousands of low-grade flying swords in the stalls, he immediately attracted the attention of the mythical Fire Palace's disciples. They followed behind him. When they saw that he had nothing to buy, a red-robed disciple squeezed to his side and cupped his hands. "I'm a disciple of the mythical Fire Palace." Yuchensho turned and looked at him. He frowned and said, "What's the matter? It seems that you want to buy a lot of all kinds of low-grade immortal equipment. My mythical Fire Palace is the #1 blacksmith sect in the 3 realms." The red-robed disciple smiled and said, "If you want to buy a lot, my mythical Fire Palace has a lot of stock. If you buy a lot, it will be cheaper. It will save you time and effort compared to you buying here and there. What do you think?" It seemed like he was a disciple of the mythical Fire Palace who was trying to attract business. Yuchensho frowned. How could he have forgotten about the mythical Fire Palace? This daddy's grudge with the Heartless Palace had already been written off. He could totally go to the mythical Fire Palace to buy things openly. Why was there a need to waste time here? Good. It's good that it's cheaper." Yuchensho nodded and smiled. The red-robed disciple immediately stretched out his hand and invited, "Sir, please follow me." The two of them flew out of the crowd. Not long later, they landed at the entrance of the mythical Fire Palace's branch. Actually, Yuchensho was very familiar with this place. He had been here many times. However, in the past he would usually directly enter the back hall to look for Elder Huo Lianqing. However, this red-robed disciple led him to a small room at the side and invited him to sit down and have some tea. After he left and returned, he respectfully brought an old man with him. The old man clearly didn't think that this little disciple could attract any big customers. He walked in with his hands behind his back. When he realized that he couldn't see through Yuchensho's cultivation, his expression became more serious. He cupped his hands and sat opposite of Yuchensho. He asked, "I'm Li Zhen. How should I address you?" "Nyoyid." Yuchensho held the teacup and replied. Li Zhen frowned and thought about it. He realized that he had never heard of this person before. However, he didn't mind it. He laughed and said, I heard from the disciple that you want to buy all kinds of low-tier immortal equipment in bulk. I wonder what kind of low-tier immortal equipment you want and how many do you want? Yuqiancho sat there and drank a mouthful of tea. He then smiled faintly and said, I want flying swords. I don't want all low-tier ones. I want high-tier ones too. However, I heard from him that it would be cheaper to buy them in bulk. Don't cheat me. He pointed at the little disciple who was standing with his hands behind his back. There's naturally a discount if you buy in bulk. He's right. Li Zhen said with a face full of smiles. Can you give me a specific number? Yuqiancho put down the teacup and said solemnly, I want as much as you have. You must be joking. Li Zhen laughed. He used his laughter to re-evaluate Yuqiancho. He was wondering if Yuqiancho really had the financial resources to buy as much as he had. One had to know that Mythical Fire Palace had been in the immortal realm for so many years. There were countless low-tier flying swords that their disciples had refined. Just this branch alone had a backlog of millions of them. If they could really sell them all, it would really be a big business. However, who would want so much trash if they had the financial resources? Do I look like I'm joking? Yuqiancho asked coldly. Of course it's better if it's true. Li Zhen twirled his white beard as he chuckled. There are 9 grades of immortal artifacts. Grade 1 is 1 divine grade spirit stone, grade 2 is 100, grade 3 is 10,000, grade 4 is 1 million, and grade 5 is 100 million. These are the market prices. If Honored Sir wants to buy in bulk, the price can be negotiated. As for grade 6 and above, any one of them would easily cost tens of billions of divine grade spirit stones. Most of them are custom-made, and the price is not something I can decide. Our branch does have a few in stock. If Honored Sire is really sincere in purchasing in large quantities, I can introduce you to the elder in charge of the branch. The price was the market price. Yuqiancho's eyes rolled as he pondered, then he asked again, report me the stock, I'll buy according to the amount of money I have. He's for real this time. Li Zhen's spirit rose, straightening his back as he said, there are about 2 million grade 1 immortal artifacts in the branch, 400,000 grade 2 immortal artifacts, 200,000 grade 3 immortal artifacts, close to 10,000 grade 4 immortal artifacts, 7 to 800 grade 5 immortal artifacts, and 11 grade 6 immortal artifacts. May I know which grade Honored Sir is looking for and how many do you need? Yuqiancho nodded thoughtfully at Li Zhen's words. Estimating just 11 grade 6 immortal artifacts would cost more than 100 billion divine grade spirit stones, and buying all the grades would cost at least 200 billion divine grade spirit stones. The total amount of spirit stones he had now was less than 80 billion, and he still needed to keep some spirit stones in reserve, yet he wanted to buy all the high-grade immortal artifacts. Truly, even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. After pondering for a while, Yuqiancho's mouth twitched. I only want 1 million grade 1 immortal artifacts. Give me as many flying swords as possible. As for the rest, I want all the grade 2, 3, 4, 5 and grade 6 immortal artifacts. The two people in front of him exchanged a glance. Li Zhen coughed lightly. He didn't expect it to be such a large sum. His previous estimate was 100,000, so he forced a smile. Honored Sir is aware that just these items alone would cost more than 200 billion divine grade spirit stones. Of course, I'm not doubting Honored Sir's wealth, but may I ask, what are you planning to do with such a large sum? Otherwise, you should know that if a large amount of things were to flow to the netherworld, it would be the same as cutting off other sects' source of income, and it would be hard for my mythical fire palace to explain to the other sections. He really couldn't figure out who else in the immortal world would want so many immortal artifacts at once. All the sects had an agreement. The mythical fire palace couldn't monopolize the netherworld's business just because of their reputation in artifact forging. This amount was a little too large. Most importantly, he was worried about this Niu Yid's wealth. You don't need to care about this, forget it. Those 2 million plus grade 1 immortal artifacts, I want all of them. Yuqiancho thought that it was better to be prepared. Since he was going to do something immoral, he couldn't care less about those 1 million plus grade 1 immortal artifacts. Thus, he decisively made his decision. His hand reached into his clothes and pulled out a bunch of storage bracelets. The two people in front of him were stunned. They couldn't imagine how Huang Xiaolong had so many storage bracelets on him. Why didn't they notice it earlier? Pa. Yuqiancho casually pulled out a storage bracelet, slapping it on the table, his voice resonant. Enough nonsense, I'm here to buy things, you're here to sell things. This is 10 billion divine grade spirit stones as a deposit, to show my sincerity. If you really want to do this business, take the deposit and the goods will be delivered at the same time. Don't waste my time with useless words. If you can't do it, let someone in charge make the final decision. Chapter 1149. Without even seeing the goods, Huang Xiaolong directly took out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones as a deposit. What a generous and wealthy buyer. The two people on the other side were stunned. They had seen rich and overbearing people, but they had never seen someone who didn't take money seriously. Li Zhen signaled the red-clothed disciple with his eyes, and the latter respectfully walked up to Yu Qianqiu, taking the storage bracelet from him. Li Zhen scanned the storage bracelet with his divine sense and discovered that it was filled to the brim with divine-grade spirit stones. There were indeed 10 billion of them. Then he looked up at the huge storage bracelets in Yu Qianqiu's hands. If there were 10 billion in each storage bracelet, then he should have at least 1 trillion in his hands. My goodness, I've really met a big buyer. Li Zhen's eyes lit up as he held the storage bracelet in his hand. He stood up and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Since you're so sincere, although I can't make the decision on my own, I'll have to report to the town elder and try my best to close the deal. Please wait for a moment, I'll be back soon. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly, indicating for him to leave quickly and return quickly. Li Zhen raised his hand again to ask him to wait for a moment, then left quickly. In the back hall, Huo Lianqing took the storage bangle from Li Zhen and checked it. After confirming the number, he returned it and frowned slightly. You purchased such a large number of celestial artifacts in one go. You didn't ask him about the purpose of the purchase? I did, but he refused to tell me. Li Zhen thought about it and said, I suspect that he's buying for the underworld, so I don't dare to agree. Netherworld? Indeed, only the Netherworld can use up such a large number of low-grade immortal artifacts at once. If it was in the past, the mythical fire palace wouldn't have dared to sell so many weapons to the Netherworld at one go. But ever since Wang Qing and his son gained power for some unknown reason, the sect actually hinted to him to loosen the restrictions on sales to the Netherworld. He was also planning for this matter, but he didn't expect that a large buyer would come knocking on his door. After some thought, Huo Lianqing said, sell it to him. Then he added, since he's a big buyer, invite him to my place. Then you go and check out the things he wants and bring them over. Try to round it up as much as possible and leave the odd bits to maintain the popularity of the daily business. Yes, but elder. Li Zhen was a little hesitant. If we do this, it'll be the equivalent of emptying the branch. The Heartless Palace has already reserved 3 million low-grade immortal artifacts for the newly formed Itinerant Cultivator Alliance. If we give them all at once, what if the Heartless Palace comes to collect the goods and we can't hand them over? Huo Lianqing waved his hand disapprovingly. That's not a problem. I'll immediately contact the sect and get them to send those low-grade immortal artifacts over as soon as possible. It'll be just nice to get rid of most of the useless things in the sect. This is a good thing. If the Heartless Palace comes to collect the goods, I'll explain. Just do as I say. Li Zhen naturally accepted the order and soon brought Yu Qianqiu over. Huo Lianqing looked at him and found that he couldn't see through his cultivation, so he invited him to sit down and have some tea. Then he asked him some questions. Yu Qianqiu sat there calmly and pretended not to know him. Seeing that he couldn't get anything out of him, Huo Lianqing said some insignificant things to kill time. It didn't take long for Li Zhen to check the number of the items. Li Zhen only needed to confirm the number of the items before he took out 6 storage bracelets and placed them on the tea table in front of Yu Qianqiu. He explained, 2 million pieces of first-grade celestial artifacts, 400,000 pieces of second-grade celestial artifacts, 200,000 pieces of third-grade celestial artifacts, 10,000 pieces of fourth-grade celestial artifacts, 800 pieces of fifth-grade celestial artifacts, and 11 pieces of sixth-grade celestial artifacts. Yu Qianqiu did not check them carefully. He just took each of the 6 storage bracelets and quickly checked the amount inside. Then he took them all in his hand and asked, no need to count. I trust the reputation of the mythical fire palace. How many spirit stones do you need in total? It was rare to see such a straightforward customer. Li Zhen smiled respectfully at Huang Xiaolong. According to the market price, the total value is 202.042 million divine-grade spirit stones, not a piece more, not a piece less. Bang. Yu Qianqiu slammed the table, causing the teacups on the table to shatter into pieces. His eyes widened in anger as he snapped, this can't be right. Why is it according to the market price again? Didn't you say that there would be a discount? Is this how your mythical fire palace conducts business? Such a huge commotion startled several disciples who rushed in from outside. Huo Lianqing and Li Zhen were stunned for a moment, thinking that they had run into some troublemaker. But when they heard the reason for Huang Xiaolong's anger, they shook their heads with a wry smile. This person might be straightforward, but his temper was truly fiery. He simply couldn't tolerate a grain of sand in his eyes. Wasn't it obvious that he hadn't finished his words? Huo Lianqing waved his hand at the disciples who rushed in. It's none of your business, just a small misunderstanding. All of you leave. After the disciples left, Huo Lianqing didn't seem to mind that they had broken his things. He smiled amiably at Yu Qianqiu. Brother Niu has misunderstood. Since we said that there will be a discount, we can sit down and discuss the price. Then he turned to Li Zhen and said, serve Brother Niu some tea, let Brother Niu calm down. A short while later, the broken things were cleaned up, and a new cup of tea was placed on the table. Yu Qianqiu sat down resentfully, placing the 6 storage bracelets back on the table. He harumphed coldly, it seems like I've misunderstood. I wonder how much discount Elder Hua is prepared to give me? Huo Lianqing revealed a warm smile as if the customer was God. How about this? We'll give Brother Niu 20 billion divine grade spirit stones. Forget about the odd bits, just take it that the 2 million grade 1 immortal artifacts and 400,000 grade 2 immortal artifacts are free gifts. What does Brother Niu think? Are you joking? Over 200 billion divine grade spirit stones and you're only offering a discount of 42 million divine grade spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu jumped to his feet with a furious expression as if he was fooled. His hand reached out to Li Zhen. This is intolerable, return 10 billion divine grade spirit stones to me, I don't want to buy any more. Li Zhen's expression stiffened, noticing that the other side wasn't as generous as he had imagined. Huo Lianqing smiled awkwardly. Brother Niu, don't be in such a hurry, name a suitable price. Yu Qianqiu retracted his hand hearing Huo Lianqing's words. He crossed his fingers and pondered for a while, then extended 2 fingers toward Huo Lianqing and Huo Lianqing. Fixed price, 200 billion divine grade spirit stones. The moment Huang Xiaolong said that, Huo Lianqing's smile froze. Cutting out 2 billion divine grade spirit stones in one go? What was the difference between this and robbery? Huo Lianqing's face sank. Brother Niu, you're not sincere. Huo Lianqing also extended 2 fingers, emphasizing each word clearly. 200 million, I'll give Brother Niu another 200 million divine grade spirit stones. This is the limit of what I can decide, a total of 201. 8 billion. Although he had already made a big concession, little did he know that even if he agreed to the other side's offer of 200 billion divine grade spirit stones, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't buy it. Yu Qianqiu would think twice before lowering the price by another 2 billion, forcing the other side to disagree. Yu Qianqiu sneered, then extended his hand toward Li Zhen. Return the 10 billion divine grade spirit stones to me. Li Zhen looked weakly at Huo Lianqing, but Huo Lianqing's face darkened. Brother Niu, you'd better think it through. Other than my mythical fire palace, you won't be able to find another place in the 3 worlds with such a favorable price. If Brother Niu is really sincere, I'll treat it as a friend and give you another 100 million discount. What does Brother Niu think? Didn't you just say that a discount of 200 million is the limit of what you can decide? Now you're going back on your words and offering another 100 million? Yu Qianqiu chuckled coldly. Little do you know that I'm a person who values character the most when doing business. If it's something I like, even if it's another 10 billion, I'm still willing. Huo Lianqing was depressed. Wasn't this how business was conducted? Are you saying that I'm not pleasing to the eye? Before Huo Lianqing could say anything, Yu Qianqiu flicked his sleeves and strode out, saying as he walked, it's an insult to my character to continue talking nonsense with you. In any case, your hands are already dirty after the 10 billion, it's beneath me to ask for it back. You can keep it and spend it slowly. Disdain was written all over his face as he strode away. Listening to Huang Xiaolong's words, it sounded like he was putting himself on a pedestal, giving others the impression that he was a misophobe. Huo Lianqing and Li Zhen exchanged a glance. This was the first time they met such a strange person. Li Zhen blanked for a moment. Elder, do you want this disciple to chase him back and have a talk? Do you think you can come to an agreement with this kind of person? Huo Lianqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I've seen all kinds of people in my life, but not this kind of person. He really has too much money and nowhere to spend it. But 10 billion divine grade spirit stones is not a small amount, so leave it for now. If one day he regrets it and comes back to ask for it, we still have to return it to him. After all, no amount of money can exchange for our mythical fire palace's golden reputation. This disciple understands. Li Zhen saluted respectfully, then put away the 6 storage bracelets on the table, turned around and left. However, a short while later, Li Zhen ran back in a flustered manner, his voice anxious. Not good. Not good. Elder, we've been tricked. Huo Lianqing frowned. How many times have I told you to stay calm? What happened? Tell me slowly, what are you panicking for? Li Zhen quickly and anxiously recounted the matter. It turned out that when he brought the items into the storage, according to the rules, the disciples who entered the storage room had to check the items again. Otherwise, if something was missing, the disciples who entered the storage room wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. In the end, other than one storage bracelet with 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones inside, the other 6 were empty. Li Zhen was not a fool. A moment's thought told him that someone had swapped the storage bracelets. Hearing this, Huo Lianqing was dumbstruck. Just now, when the items were placed back on the table, he had been keeping a close watch on them. There shouldn't have been a chance to swap them out. Could it be that when the other party smashed the table? You stupid pig. Who did you bring? If more than 200 billion worth of treasures are gone just like that, you and I can forget about having a good life. Hurry up and send people out to search. Huo Lianqing bellowed, taking the lead, and dashed out in a hurry. Chapter 1150. The entire Lifefire Palace's branch instantly moved out in full force, swiftly searching the entire illusionary immortal city. They even searched the area within 100 miles of the illusionary immortal city. However, how could they still find Niu Yid's shadow? Even a fool would know that after scamming someone, they had to flee as fast as they could. In addition, Niu Yid was a swindler who dared to come to the Lifefire Palace to commit fraud. They didn't find him, but the commotion caused the people of the city to go around trying to find out what exactly happened. The Lifefire Palace actually mobilized so many people. After that, he saw many Lifefire Palace's disciples stopping people in the central plaza, interrogating them one by one. Their questions were all about whether they had seen a person named Niu Yid who looked like that before. When the investigation reached Nongzhu's stall, Nongzhu was speechless. Others might not know Niu Yid, but it would be strange if he said he didn't. However, he also didn't know what Yu Qianqiu had done. But based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, once there was a commotion involving that brat, he would definitely be up to no good. Hence, he shook his head and said he didn't know him. It was fine if he didn't know him, he couldn't help but ask, what happened? The Lifefire Palace's disciple coldly snorted, don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Hence, Nongzhu could only shut his mouth. However, there was no impermeable wall in the world. The pitiful Huo Lianqing discovered that his losses were too great. He basically had no way to report to his sect. He could only hurriedly seek help from the other major sects to capture Niu Yid. In truth, he also suspected that Niu Yid was using a fake name. Who would use a real name to commit fraud? For a period of time, the various sects more or less gave face to Huo Lianqing, sending many people to search everywhere. They even sent orders back to their sects to inform their people to take note of this. After all, everyone wanted to know who this Niu Yid was exactly. He actually dared to deceive the Lifefire Palace. Also, under the situation where there was no harm, if they captured Niu Yid, it would be equivalent to the Lifefire Palace owing them a favor. In this case, the more people there were, the more mouths there would be. What happened naturally couldn't be concealed. When everyone knew that it was someone who cheated the Lifefire Palace of over 200 billion worth of treasures, the entire hallucinatory immortal city was in an uproar. Some scolded that Niu Yid for being immoral, some praised that Niu Yid for having guts. Therefore, many people jokingly said that this swindler's name was too perfect. Why not call him Wicked Niu or Gutsy Niu? Wouldn't calling Niu Yid be smacking the face of the Lifefire Palace? Hearing this news, Nongzhu was stunned for a long time. The muscles on her face couldn't stop twitching. She didn't expect that the guy would do such a big thing in the blink of an eye. It seemed that there was really nothing in this world that he didn't dare to do. Moreover, he was 100% sure that it was Yu Qianqiu who did it, because Yu Qianqiu had said before he left that he wanted to change the weapons of a large group of his subordinates. But didn't he say he was going shopping? How did it become a scam? Nongzhu couldn't understand how Yu Qianqiu managed to scam them. Could it be that the people of the Lifefire Palace were all fools? How could they scam an item worth over 200 billion just like that? Damn it. It must be Huo Lianqing scolding me. I've already given you 10 billion. Your Lifefire Palace is rich and powerful. Would it kill me to earn a little more? In the conference room of the Divine Ruin Realm, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his itchy nose and scolded. However, seeing the 6 storage bracelets on the conference table, he immediately became spirited again. Previously, he was still thinking about how to solve the problem of weapons for millions of people. He went to the fantasy immortal city with the goal of buying as many as he could. Who would have thought that he would solve the problem at once so quickly? Moreover, there was still enough left. It was enough for one person to give 2 bracelets. Just thinking about it made him admire himself. However, he felt a little emotional. He thought that he didn't need to do such things anymore at this point. He didn't expect that some things could be solved with the methods of the Jianghu. However, he really couldn't use it in the future. At the very least, he had to use it sparingly. If he used it too much, he would be embarrassed. Having solved another big problem, he instantly felt a lot more relaxed. He sat on the chair and crossed his legs on the table. He started to remove Niu Yud's mask. When he put away the mask, he couldn't help but open it and sigh. Exchanging you for about 200 billion is worth it. You probably won't be able to show your face in the future. He put away the mask with a sigh. He wasn't worried that someone would reveal his identity as Niu Yud. After all, not many people in the Immortal and Netherworld knew about it. Even if he was exposed, he could completely refuse to admit it without any solid evidence. At this moment, Zhang Peng walked in quickly and bowed. "Master, what's the matter?" Yu Qianqiu put down his crossed legs and pointed to the 6 storage bracelets on the table. These storage bracelets have 11 grade 6 immortal artifacts, 800 grade 5 immortal artifacts, 10,000 grade 4 immortal artifacts, 200,000 grade 3 immortal artifacts, 400,000 grade 2 immortal artifacts, and 2 million grade 1 immortal artifacts. Take them and decide whether to give them to them. So many? Zhang Peng was shocked. He picked up the 6 storage bracelets and examined them. He couldn't help but gasp. He couldn't imagine where his master had gotten so many celestial artifacts. The number was too huge. He had heard from the commanders of the various armies about the prices of celestial artifacts of various grades in the celestial world. How many spirit stones would it cost to buy these things? Zhang Peng looked at his master with admiration. At least, he didn't have the ability to get so many immortal artifacts in one go. Yu Qianqiu, who was changing his clothes, naturally wouldn't tell his disciple that he had cheated them. After changing his clothes, he disappeared. In the valley outside the illusionary immortal city, Yu Qianqiu had just flown into the air when he saw 3 mythical fire palace disciples surrounding him and sizing him up. Yu Qianqiu thought that the matter had probably been exposed. On the surface, he snorted coldly. So it's mythical fire palace disciples. What do you want? He's the World Commerce Association sect leader, Yu Qianqiu. One of them whispered to his left and right. Obviously, he had seen Yu Qianqiu before. The 3 of them clasped their hands and bowed. "We're pursuing the fugitive. Sorry to disturb sect leader Yu." Then they quickly flew away. Yu Qianqiu flicked his sleeves and continued flying towards the illusionary immortal city. Now that the grudge between him and Heartless Palace had been resolved, he could finally show his face openly. After he entered the illusionary immortal city, it immediately caused a commotion. The news of Yu Qianqiu's return spread rapidly. As for Yu Qianqiu himself, he felt as if he, Han San, had returned to his previous life. He swaggered through the market, constantly looking around and asking questions at the various stalls. He pretended to unknowingly walk to the front of Nongzhu's stall to check out the items on display. Nongzhu was at a loss for words watching Huang Xiaolong fiddling with the sculptures. In the end, she couldn't help but send a voice transmission to Huang Xiaolong. "Brat, you're too black-hearted. You swindled over 200 billion immortal artifacts from the Lifefire Palace. How do you want Huo Lianqing and the rest to establish themselves in the Lifefire Palace in the future? Don't listen to those rumors. I spent 10 billion divine great spirit stones to buy those immortal artifacts. How did it turn into swindling in your mouth? This sect leader is rich, why would I need to swindle others?" Yu Qianqiu retorted disdainfully. "Fine. You have guts. 10 billion divine grade spirit stones can buy over 200 billion immortal artifacts. If there's a chance, I'd like to see how you do it." Nongzhu couldn't be bothered to argue with Huang Xiaolong anymore. She changed the topic. "You've just done something bad, why didn't you go and lay low for a while? What are you doing here?" Yu Qianqiu stared at the mountain peak in the distance. A light flickered in his eyes as he said, "I'm considering if I should rebuild the World Commerce Hall. That way, I won't need to hide when I go out to gather information. It's just like you and me talking here, it's so inconvenient. Sooner or later, people will start to suspect you." Just as he finished speaking, bright lights shot out from the various sects, flying up to the sky. Cries of fear and panic came from afar, spreading like the tide. "Not good. Jin Taihe and Bai Qi used a scheme to stop Wang Qing and Wu Feng from entering the netherworld. Jin Taihe is delaying Wang Qing and Wu Feng in the netherworld, while Bai Qi has set up a grand formation at the entrance to the immortal netherworld. Bai Qi is killing his way to the devil world, no one can stop him. It's over. The devil world's passage is about to be opened by Bai Qi, everyone quickly run. All sorts of rumors and slanders started to spread everywhere. The entire illusory immortal city was in a mess. Panicked merchants and peddlers quickly packed their things and flew away. Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu glanced at each other, then looked around with an unusually solemn look. That's mine. There were already people taking advantage of the situation. Screams could be heard from time to time. They took advantage of the chaos to kill people, steal their things and run. Quickly pack your things and find a place to hide. The peddler beside Nongzhu had gotten to know Nongzhu over the past few days and kindly reminded her. He had already packed his things and flew into the sky. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu. She didn't need to transmit her voice and said directly, "It looks like you have to put aside the matter of rebuilding the World Commerce Hall. What do you plan to do now?" Yu Qianqiu coldly looked around at the chaos and said slowly in a low voice, "I didn't expect Wang Qing and his son to not be able to stop Jin Tai and Bai Qi. What will come will come. I have no other choice now. I can only take it one step at a time." In just a short while, the entire hallucinatory immortal city was completely empty. The bustling city of the past had become windy in the blink of an eye. Only the two of them stood in the square with cold expressions. Once the demonic path returned to the three realms, who knew where the peddlers could hide? At the entrance of the demon realm's seal in the immortal realm, three figures appeared in the enlarged obsidian light mirror. The imposing demon monarch three knights sat on the blood jade throne, his scarlet cloak hanging halfway down his left leg. His tiger-like eyes shone with a demonic red light. To the left of the blood jade throne was Yan Zhuixing in black. To the right was Eunuch Li in white. The three of them stared coldly at Bai Qi. Before Bai Qi could greet him, Demon King Three Knights shouted, "Bai Qi! How dare you make fun of me? Demon King, please calm down." In fear and trepidation, Bai Qi explained the reason why he and Jin Tai had delayed opening the passageway to the demon realm and reported, "I am already at the entrance of the passageway between the immortal realm and the demon realm, and can open the passageway to the demon realm at any time. Demon Monarch, please be prepared, otherwise, I'm afraid that something unexpected will happen." Hearing this, Demon King Three Knights knew that the devil world was about to open. He couldn't help but become excited. He closed his eyes and slowly asked, "Who is waiting at the entrance to the immortal world?" Eunuch Li immediately faced him and bowed slightly. "It's the 100,000 demonic path army led by the demon king Qing Tian." Chapter 1151. Bai Qi, how long do you need to unseal the demon world? Demon King Three Knights' eyes slowly opened, revealing a blood-red glow. An hour is enough for this subordinate, but this subordinate is worried that Wang Qing and his son will arrive at any moment. If the demon world army doesn't come out in time, this subordinate is afraid that something will happen. Seeing that the demon world was about to open and the demonic path was about to return to the three realms, Bai Qi's attitude became even more respectful. At the same time he was hesitating. The reason why he didn't open the passage to the demon world first was because he wanted to see Demon King Three Knights' attitude before making a final decision. After all, this was not a small matter. He couldn't afford to lose. Demon King Three Knights seemed to guess what he was thinking and said slowly and heavily, "After this matter is successful, this sovereign will keep his promise. The underworld will still be controlled by you, Bai Qi, on behalf of the demonic path, but if you dare to lie to me, there are some things that I might as well tell you. Even if you don't open the passage to the demon world, this sovereign's return to the three realms is only a matter of time, so do as you see fit." Hearing this, Bai Qi was shocked. He knew that although Demon King Three Knight was a demonic cultivator, he was a supreme demonic cultivator who thought highly of himself. There was no need for him to lie to him. He must have already found a way to open the passage to the demon world, but the time was not right yet. He said respectfully, "This subordinate doesn't dare." Demon King Three Knight looked straight at Bai Qi and suddenly shouted in a loud voice, "Quickly open the passage to the demon world and welcome the demonic path's army back to the three realms." Yes. Bai Qi accepted the order fearfully and raised his hand to put away the obsidian light mirror floating in front of him. The image in front of him disappeared. Demon King Three Knights suddenly stood up and looked outside the tall palace gate. his decisive voice resounded through the entire mountain peak. Send my order to Qing Tian, the passage between the immortal world and demon world is about to open. Tell her to lead the army and prepare to set off at any time. Tell her that after entering the immortal world, everything else has nothing to do with her. Tell her to guard the passage to the demon world at all costs and welcome the demonic path's army. If she dares to ruin my plans, have her head come to see me. Send my order to Li Tian Ho Tu Xiang Rong Ba Hu Shan Duan Shuang Han Ba Meng Yen Tunhai Amo Luo Yao Erlang, and the other demon kings to lead their armies to the passage to the immortal world. Erlang will lead the army to assist Qing Tian after entering the immortal world and demon world. Erlang will lead the army and help to guard the passage. Everyone else, Dan, Tian and Tian will need to stay to wait. Qi, and will to enter the passage. Demon will. And Qing. If anyone dares to ruin my plans, kill. Send my order to Qing Qiu Di Lang Rushing Fury, Ing Long Yu Guang Ing Zhao Qi Mei Shen Hui Tian Ho Snake Xiu Tsang Lei Bain, and the other demon kings to gather at the passage between the immortal world and the nether world. Once the passage opens, immediately enter the nether world to meet up with the receiving army. Leave Han Ba and Tsang Lei to guard the passage, then split into two groups. One group will sweep the enemies in the nether world, and the other in the immortal world. If anyone dares to disobey my orders, kill them no matter who they are. Send my order to the other demon kings to lead their armies to guard the demon world and wait for further orders. If anyone dares to cause trouble, kill them without mercy. Send my order to the demon kings. First conquer the immortal world and the nether world, then conquer the 72 worlds of the human world. After conquering the world in one fell swoop, of the 72 worlds of the human world, I will divide 36 worlds and give them to the 36 demon kings as rewards. If there are any who fail in battle, their right to receive rewards will be revoked. Demon King 3 Knights brazenly gave out orders. Yan Zhuixing, who stood solemnly to the side, had a ferocious excitement in his eyes. Eunuch Li, who was dressed in white robes and a white hat, memorized all the orders and quickly passed them down. In the howling wind, Bai Qi, who stood in front of the seal to the demon world, had his clothes fluttering. His spotless feet were actually covered in dirt. He looked at the iron seal in front of him with a dazed expression. No one knew what he was thinking. Why haven't Wang Qing and Wu Feng come yet? Anxious voices faintly came from afar. Finally, a trace of hatred flashed across Bai Qi's face. He quickly raised the obsidian underworld light mirror in his hand and a ray of black light shone on the iron seal. The black light was uneven and rapidly pulsed. The densely packed and strange runes on the iron seal suddenly began to move slowly like tadpoles. Finally, they gradually turned into a cheerful swimming motion, condensing into a spiraling whirlpool. The whirlpool slowly sank deeper into the mountain. Then it cracked, collapsed and caved in bit by bit. Finally, the entire iron seal was sucked into the belly of the mountain. With a loud rumbling sound, it turned into a rotating black light. The passageway between the immortal realm and the demonic realm that had been sealed for countless years was finally reopened. Bai Qi stood there in a daze. Behind him there were countless sorrowful cries and screams, but at this moment he could not hear anything. In his ears, there was only the sound of the opening of the passage to the demon world, and in his eyes, there was only the spiraling black light. Not long after, a group of green figures continuously shot out from the spiraling black light. Their joyful cheers and screams resounded through the sky, and also woke up the dazed Bai Qi. Seeing countless green-clothed monsters quickly occupy the favorable terrain around the exit, he did not know how many people had come out. He could only see that the dense crowd was still expanding in all directions, and the messy formation behind the mountain was also rapidly being nibbled away by the crowd. After the last group of green-clothed people came out, the thousands of people quickly split into two sides in an H shape. No one went to disturb Bai Qi, who was standing in the middle. They turned a blind eye to him as if he did not exist. However, Bai Qi's gaze suddenly became solemn, and he stared closely at the spiraling black light. He saw a beautiful figure flash out, with a curvaceous waist and a green long dress trailing behind her. A beautiful woman, who was as beautiful as a flower, leisurely walked over with her bright eyes, and finally stopped outside the cave. She opened her naked arms and gently closed her eyes, as if she wanted to embrace the whole world. Her red lips moved and she murmured, "I didn't think I could return to the celestial world again, and I haven't breathed in the air of the celestial world for a long time, so fragrant." The expression on her face was incomparably enjoyable and intoxicated. Qing Tian. Why are you the only one out, where are the others? Bai Qi's voice broke the beautiful woman's beautiful dream. From his tone and expression, he seemed to be an old acquaintance of this beautiful woman. This woman was one of the 36 great demon kings under Demon Monarch 3 Knights, Qing Tian Great Demon King. The beautiful woman slowly opened her eyes, and a trace of fierceness flashed in her gaze as she stared at Bai Qi, which was immediately filled with playfulness. She smiled brightly and said, "So it's you, Bai Qi." She leisurely walked to Bai Qi's side with her green long dress, and walked a few rounds around Bai Qi with interest. As she examined him, she chuckled and said, "If you knew it would be like this, why did you do it in the first place?" Bai Qi suddenly turned his hand and directly grabbed onto the swan-like fair and slender neck of the Qing Tian. He pulled her in front of him and tightly clasped her neck. He snorted coldly and said, "What I do is my own business, I don't need you to teach me. Let me ask you, why are you the only one out, where are the others?" Seeing his old acquaintance, his actions seemed to have returned to the turbulent era. Seeing that he actually dared to make a move against the Qing Tian Great Demon King, the green-clothed people on both sides instantly went into an uproar and were about to attack. The Qing Tian Great Demon King, whose neck was being clasped, raised his hand slightly and stopped his subordinates from making a move. He then grabbed Bai Qi's wrist and pushed it away. The smile on his face did not change as he said, "What are you so anxious about? The Demon Monarch has already summoned the 12 Great Demon Kings to lead the army here. My mission is to guard the passage between the Celestial Realm and the Demon Realm and welcome the arrival of the army. But what are you afraid of?" She leisurely walked past Bai Qi, and her bright eyes stared sharply at the silhouettes of the Celestial Realm people in the distance. She said confidently, "I want to see what kind of people can scare you, Bai Qi." She lightly waved her jade arm and pointed to the distance. She said lazily, "Blockhead, you lead 10,000 people and eliminate those sneaky Celestial Realm people." Her tone was so calm. "Yes." A strange person wearing a loose green robe with a protruding forehead happily accepted the order. He waved his coarse hand that was like a cattail leaf fan, and a group of people in green robes rushed after him. The disciples of the various sects in the distance saw that the demon sect had already launched an attack, and they immediately scattered. They did not even block the attack before they all ran for their lives. This made the Qing Tian Great Demon King chuckle like a silver bell. He said, "As expected, you are still so weak. I really don't understand how you could be defeated by these people. Don't be too happy too early. These are all people from the various sects who can't be seen in public. If the Celestial Realm and the Netherworld were really so weak, the Demon Monarch would have already unified the 3 realms." Bai Qi turned around and looked at the people who were chasing in the distance. "If it wasn't for you and the Vajra slave, the Demon Monarch would have naturally unified the 3 realms." The Qing Tian turned around and looked at him. She stretched out a slender finger and pointed it at Bai Qi's chest. She said, "What a pity. The Demon Monarch just had to listen to those lies. He came up with some stupid strategy to appease the Demon Monarch. He wanted to achieve long-term peace and created you and the Vajra slave to be the Emperor of the Immortal Realm and the Emperor of the Underworld. In the end you were tricked." Bai Qi waved his hand and pushed her finger away. He sneered and said, "You should be worried about how you are going to defend this place when the strong enemies come." The Qing Tian Great Demon King retracted her finger, but she raised her entire jade arm and hung it lazily on his shoulder. She smiled and said, "Strong enemies? Overturn the 2 of you? I don't care about them, but I want to see those old opponents again. I don't know if they can stop the advance of the Demon World's army." Back then, when the old people of the Celestial Realm and the Netherworld saw that the 3 realms had been settled, they all went to the Netherworld Palace one after another. They wholeheartedly searched for the gate to the Realm of Gods. "I guess they won't come out again." Bai Qi's eyes flashed as if he was thinking of something. "They all went to the Netherworld Palace?" The Qing Tian Great Demon King's smile froze. She said in surprise, "So many people have wasted their entire lives without being able to enter. Could it be that they still haven't learned their lesson and still believe in that stupid legend?" Chapter 1152. To be able to reach their level through long and arduous cultivation, they will be lonely once they have no opponents. They can endure for a while, but few can endure for a lifetime. It is because they have been forging ahead their whole lives that they can reach their level. Unlike us, who have too many restraints and too many distracting thoughts, how can we reach the peak? Bai Qi sighed and said, It doesn't matter if the coiling dragon god really left a passageway to the god realm in the netherworld divine palace. There's no longer any meaning for them to stay in the three realms, especially after the devil path was sealed. They call the netherworld god mansion a small realm of gods. At least there they can find an equal opponent. I even think that after the three nights Demon King unifies the three realms, he will feel lonely after a long time. Since they have all left, then the Demon King's unification of the three realms is just around the corner. There won't be any more obstacles. In other words, it won't be long before the fourth Demon King takes over. The Clear Sky Demon King thought for a while, then smiled. Even if the coiling dragon god really left a passage to the realm of gods in the netherworld god mansion, with Lord Demon God's ability, he couldn't find it. In the end he still took the path of ascension. Could they be more powerful than Lord Demon God? They are simply deceiving themselves. Hearing this, Bai Qi showed a mocking expression and said scornfully, "What? You want to sleep with the fourth Demon King again? From the Demon God to the three knights? Shut up." The Qing Tian Great Demon King suddenly stopped him, and a layer of frost appeared on his face as he said, "If you didn't climb into my bed, you wouldn't be qualified to be the Emperor of the Underworld. What right do you have to criticize me?" Bai Qi's face darkened and his lips tightened. If it wasn't for the woman in front of him that made him angry, he wouldn't have taken the risk to seal the realm of demons with Jin Tai. Behind every successful person, more or less, there was a painful past that they could not bear to recall. Just when the atmosphere between the two of them became a little heavy, the earth rumbled and shook. Screams and screams could be heard from afar. The man and woman, who were speechless, suddenly looked into the distance and saw a monstrous shadow of a staff sweeping in all directions. They could vaguely see flesh and blood splattering everywhere. The Qing Tian Devil King's expression turned serious. His eyes were sharp as he asked, "Who is this?" "This is the current sovereign of the underworld, the king of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng, who is also Wang Qing's father. The divine wind staff in his hand comes from the netherworld divine palace. It is said that it is a treasure left behind by the great god Coiling Dragon in the netherworld divine palace after he killed the wind god." Bai Qi said indifferently, "He finally arrived. I want to see how you are going to deal with the divine wind staff in his hands." Just as he finished speaking, Wu Feng's voice boomed from afar. "Bai Qi, you will be the greatest sinner of the three realms." A black whirlwind rose from the ground. In the blink of an eye, it was as fast as lightning. In an instant the clouds in the sky began to move. The clouds in the sky were swept up like cotton. The wind strengthened the momentum of the whirlwind. The soil and rocks were sucked in. The trees were uprooted one by one. All of them were sucked into the body of that terrifying whirlwind. Seeing that the whirlwind covered the sky and covered the earth, the Qing Tian Devil King waved his hand and pointed. Countless green lights shot out from the hands of the green-robed men. However, they were instantly swallowed by the whirlwind without any reaction. The so-called demonic cultivators are only SOSO. With me here, the three realms will not tolerate the insolence of you demonic cultivators. A burst of wild laughter came from the whirlwind. The whirlwind blew the sky and the earth, causing the surroundings to darken. Countless soil and rocks shot out in all directions like a heavy downpour. Countless green-robed men formed a formation to defend against the whirlwind. In an instant, green splendor soared into the sky. Those who were caught unprepared screamed in pain. In the blink of an eye, countless people had fallen. After the whirlwind neared, it quickly twisted into a huge hand and grabbed at the Qing Tian Devil King and Bai Qi below. Little bastard who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The Qing Tian Devil King let out a cold snort. She raised her jade-like arms high up and rapidly expanded into two terrifying old tree claws. It was terrifying to look at. It was hard to imagine that such a beautiful woman could undergo such a terrifying transformation. One of her hands grabbed the huge hand of the whirlwind, while the other was like a hungry tiger trying to dig out its heart. She directly inserted it into the center of the whirlwind, intending to crush Wu Feng, who was hiding in the whirlwind. Her imposing manner was incomparably domineering. However, the whirlwind suddenly became faster. Like countless steel knives, it directly minced the big hand that was in a stalemate into countless pieces. Ding-ling-dang-lang sounds were heard. An incomparably thick staff exploded from the whirlwind and smashed the other big hand into pieces on the spot. In an instant it collapsed. "Ah!" The Qing Tian Devil King cried out in pain and retreated a few steps. The two terrifying old claws that were mostly broken quickly retracted. In the blink of an eye they returned to two jade-like arms. However, the Qing Tian Devil King's face was deathly pale. He no longer had the contempt he had before. Instead, there was some fear in his eyes. It seemed that he did not expect the other party to be able to injure him so easily. Now you know the power of the divine wind staff. Bai Chi's tone was a bit gloating. However, he had already flipped over the obsidian light mirror in his hand. The black light that shot out angrily illuminated the heaven and earth, desperately resisting the approaching whirlwind. Those who stand in my way will die. Wu Feng's wanton laughter came. The pressure produced by the whirlwind was immediately frighteningly great. It forcibly compressed the black light that shot out angrily. The barefooted Bai Chi was quickly pushed back. Like an iron plow plowing the ground, he crashed into the mountain rocks with a rumbling sound. His feet drew a deep trench on the ground. Bai Chi's face was full of grief and indignation. Blood had already been choked out from the corner of his mouth. His arms that were holding the obsidian light mirror were already trembling uncontrollably. It seemed that he could not hold on any longer. However, he had to desperately hold on because there was no way out now. Of course, he could also escape now, but the consequences were not something he could bear. Her divine wind staff had effortlessly forced back the 100,000-strong army of the great devil King Qing Tian. Her fine black hair had unknowingly come loose, and her beautiful hair was dancing in the strong wind. She stared at Bai Chi for a while, and suddenly she heard a loud and clear neigh of a horse coming from behind her. It was a little breathtaking. Looking back, she saw an unusually strong and fat black steed. A ghost-faced rider wearing a ferocious mask was sitting on it. His whole body was covered in black armor. One of his hands was holding the reins, and the other was holding a curled black whip. The strong black steed's mouth and nose spat out green flames from time to time. A man and a horse suddenly appeared from the passage to the demon realm. It was incomparably strange. The eyes of the demon King Qing Tian lit up, and he said with incomparable joy, "Black Knight, you came at the right time. Quickly come and help me kill this thief." He pointed his finger at the terrifying hurricane that was pressing down on them. At this moment, another two riders leaped out from the passage to the demon realm. They were also black steeds that spat out green flames. However, the two people on the horses held the reins in one hand and held up two large black flags in the other. The flags fluttered in the wind, and the two phosphorescent words "Black Knight" were extremely conspicuous on the black flags. However, these two riders carried long swords on their backs and wore black battle robes. Their faces were not covered with the ferocious ghost mask. In just a short while, countless Black Knight troops had already galloped out from the passage to the demon realm. And the rider wearing the ghost-faced rider had already fiercely lashed out the black whip in his hand. A black whip shadow that could split the heaven and earth broke through the darkness. Like a black thunderbolt, it directly struck into the hurricane that was pressing down on them with a boom. He then sat firmly on the back of the horse. His big arm pulled back and the black steed he was sitting on stubbornly stepped back. "My divine wind staff." Wu Feng's cry of surprise came from within the hurricane. The black whirlwind also collapsed in an instant. Amidst the flying dust, the divine wind staff was actually pulled over by the black whip. With someone helping him, Bai Chi, who was resisting tenaciously, was finally able to catch his breath. However, he was already buried deep in the ground. Only his head was exposed above the ground and his face was pale. The demon King Qing Tian suddenly shouted, "Wu Feng, today is the day you die." Seeing that the divine wind staff was trapped by the Black Knight, she immediately flew up into the sky. Her green long dress that was dragging behind her quickly grew long like a peacock spreading its tail. Her arms once again revealed ferocious giant claws. Behind her was a huge green net that covered the sky. Her black hair danced wildly in the big net. Her whole body was like a ferocious ghost pouncing on Wu Feng in the sky. "Divine wind staff break." Wu Feng shouted in shock. The divine wind staff suddenly grew bigger, directly shattering the black whip that was entangling her. At the same time, the 9 big rings on the pumpkin-shaped staff suddenly exploded with 9 black wind blades. They shot out in all directions like ghosts, immediately cutting the green dress that was covering the sky into pieces. The pair of giant claws of the demon King Qing Tian were also easily destroyed by the 9 black wind blades. She let out a cry of surprise and quickly shot up into the sky to avoid the 9 frightening black wind blades. The eyes of Ghostface were also very shocked. The long whip in his hand once again grew long and swung out. Countless whip shadows that could split the heavens and the earth struck the divine wind staff with a rumbling sound. The power of each whip was stronger than the previous one, and the divine wind staff was directly sent flying into the sky. Wu Feng, who could not control it, was shocked. 9 black wind blades protected his body and quickly chased after the divine wind staff, afraid that it would fall into the hands of others. The Black Knight on the back of the horse retracted his whip. Ignoring the danger in front of him, he shook the reins in his hand and the black horse immediately spat out a large ball of green flames. Its 4 hooves flew into the sky and quickly sped away. 2 knights holding large banners quickly chased after him. Behind him, an endless stream of black knights leaped out of the demon world passageway and quickly chased after him. An army of knights flew across the sky and set off a black demonic cloud. They were heading in the direction of the passageway between the netherworld and immortal realms. Black Knights, how dare you leave me in the lurch? If something happens to the demon world passageway here, let's see if Demon King 3 Knight will forgive you. The Demon King Qing Tian's shout echoed in the sky. However, the leader of the Black Pegasus army did not even reply. It was as if the danger here had nothing to do with him. He only cared about his own journey without stopping. High up in the sky, the Demon King Qing Tian, whose clothes were in tatters, looked at the Black Knight army moving away. He was so angry that he clenched his teeth and stomped his feet. However, there was nothing he could do. With a flash of green light, he rearranged his clothes and flashed back to the ground. He supported by Qi, who was staggering up from the ground. Chapter 1153. Wu Feng, who had chased after the Wind God staff, was bewildered, but when he saw that the Black Knights didn't have any intention of fighting him, he was overjoyed and wanted to take the chance to kill Bai Qi and Demon King Qing Tian. Who would have thought that as soon as they got close, they would see a strong man with bulging muscles and blue veins that looked like earthworms shoot out from the demon world's passage. He carried a snow-white broadsword on his shoulder and stood in the air, looking around like a tiger, his long beard swaying, exuding a domineering aura. Wu Feng was shocked and didn't dare to act rashly. But then he saw that the man seemed to have gone crazy. He held his broadsword and laughed wildly. I didn't think that there would be a day when I would return to the 3 realms, haha. His laughter shook people's eardrums. Li Tian, you came at the right time. Help me kill this thief and guard the tunnel to the demon world. The Demon King of Qing Tian was extremely surprised. He flashed to the side of the bare-chested muscular man and pointed his finger at Wu Feng, who was looking at him from afar. You still can't beat him? Li Tian looked at Wu Feng in surprise and laughed. He's just a late-stage emperor of the underworld. Can't you just use your green demon seed to turn him into your puppet? Demon King Qing Tian stomped his feet. You know that Lord Demon God forbade me from using the green demon seed in the 3 realms? Before Demon King 3 Knights agreed, I wouldn't dare to use it. Stop wasting time. That person's Wind God staff is a divine weapon. I have all my abilities but can't do anything to him. Come help me. Otherwise, I won't be able to answer to Demon King if the tunnel to the demon world is lost. So that's how it is. Li Tian looked at the Wind God staff in Wu Feng's hand with interest. It did look a bit restless. But then he saw a group of muscular men carrying broadswords coming from the tunnel to the demon world. He shook his head apologetically. Qing Tian, I'm sorry this time. Demon King has ordered us to go to the underworld to open the tunnel between the underworld and demon world after we leave the celestial world. Shuiying and I have to guard the tunnel. Demon King said that we can't stop for any reason, or we'll be killed. But there's no need for you to worry. The Demon Lord has already ordered 12 Demon Kings to lead an army here, and soon after, Yao Erlang will lead an army to reinforce you. I won't be accompanying you. Li Tian waved the snow-white broadsword in his hand and immediately led a large group of sword-wielding men away. Among them, there were quite a number of sword-wielding women who only wore loose trousers and tube tops. Their figures were fit and beautiful, attracting the eyes of others. The Devil King of Qing Tian was speechless. She finally understood why the Shadow Knights had ignored her request for help. When Wu Feng, who was in the distance, heard that 12 great demon kings were leading an army, he was shocked on the spot. He grasped the divine wind staff in his hand and looked at the demon world's passageway below and hesitated. He was completely confident that he could use the wind god staff in his hand to block the passage to the demon world so that others could not open it again. However, after thinking about it again and again, he still could not bear to give up the wind god staff. One had to know that without the wind god staff he was nothing. Anyway, he did not make it in time to stop the demon world's passageway from opening. Therefore, he gritted his teeth and ran away with the wind god staff, not caring about the lives of the living beings in the 3 realms. The Devil King of Qingtian was stunned and looked at Bai Qi below. Both of them did not think that Wu Feng would run away just like that. In the end, the Devil King of Qingtian was perturbed. He did not know if that fellow had other tricks up his sleeves. At this moment, a blood-red light swept out from the demon world's passageway. Instantly, the pungent smell of blood filled the air. A sinister man dressed in blood-red clothes appeared in the air and looked around. His gaze fell on the Devil King of Qingtian and he nodded slightly as a greeting. Blood Shadow. The Devil King of Qingtian also greeted him. Then he immediately saw a group of people dressed in blood-red clothes rushing out from the demon world's passageway. It was like a flood of red blood. There was actually a faint red blood mist in the air. The Devil King of Qingtian flung his long robe and quickly left. An endless stream of people dressed in blood-red clothes followed him. When the thick smell of blood in the air had just dissipated, another blurry phantom shot out from the demon world's passageway. It floated in the air like an illusion. It was impossible to see what the person inside looked like. The Devil King of Qingtian shouted, "Nightmare!" The illusory figure's voice was already confused as he replied, "Bai Qi. The Devil King has ordered you to follow us to the underworld to open the seal between the underworld and the demon world. Quickly follow us." As soon as he finished speaking, a dreamy and illusory fog surged out from the demon world's passageway. One could see many figures inside, but they could not be seen clearly. Bai Qi looked deeply at the Devil King of Qingtian. There was an indescribable, inexplicable look in his eyes. He resolutely turned around and followed this army shrouded in fog to chase after the Devil King of Qingtian. The Devil King of Qingtian looked at Bai Qi, who had gone far away, and bit her red lips. She suddenly turned around and swept her gaze over the green-clothed subordinates who had been frightened by the divine wind staff. She roared, "All of you guard the demon world's passageway properly. If anyone dares to escape, kill them without mercy." Her voice was frighteningly sharp, and there was a tremor of anger in it. The large group of green-clothed people who had scattered like sheep quickly gathered back to occupy advantageous terrain to continue guarding the passageway to the demon world. In the supreme demon palace of the demon world, Yan Zhuoxing was still standing to the left of the Devil King of Qingtian's blood jade throne. Eunuch Li, who was dressed in white, was slightly bowing to the right, reporting the situation of the various armies entering the celestial world. Seeing that things were progressing smoothly, the Devil King of Qingtian, who was listening with his eyes closed, finally let out a sigh of relief. He opened his eyes and tilted his head slightly to look at Yan Zhuoxing on the left. He smiled and said, "After we pacify the three realms, I will personally lead some people to accompany you to the Blue Sea outside the celestial world and search for the Blue Sea essence in the Blue Sea death trap. This will help you cleanse the devil barrier that has accumulated in your body due to cultivating demonic techniques." "Thank you, Devil King, for your favor, but..." Yan Zhuoxing said excitedly, "It is recorded in the demonic book that the Blue Sea essence is produced from the blue crystals that fell from the endless starry sky countless years ago. It is unknown how many years it takes for it to be produced. It is very precious and can be said to be the essence of the universe. After Lord Devil God discovered it, he treated it as a treasure. Lord Devil God also borrowed the Blue Sea essence to temper himself, allowing his cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds. It is a treasure that cultivators can only encounter but not seek. It is a pity that most people do not know its profoundness. Even the three young masters did not enjoy such a fortuitous encounter. How can Yan Zhuoxing dare to monopolize it?" "You are worrying too much." The Devil King of Qingtian waved his hand slightly and said, "Not everyone can enjoy the Blue Sea essence. Those who are not talented will not be able to enjoy it. If they use it, they will suffer a backlash. If it is light, it will change a person's personality. If it is heavy, it will make a person lose their mind and lose their sense of self. This is the so-called qi deviation in cultivation. If it is serious, they will not be able to withstand the baptism of the Blue Sea essence and explode." Yan Zhuoxing was slightly surprised. He had never seen this in the records of the demonic book. The Devil King of Qingtian continued, "I know the talent of my three sons better than anyone else. With their intelligence, they will not be able to withstand the baptism of the Blue Sea essence. Letting them enjoy it will only harm them. So, my youngest son is quite intelligent. Unfortunately, the demon realm was sealed back then, so I could not obtain the Blue Sea essence to help him refine his body and change his fate of not being able to cultivate. Otherwise, my demonic path would have gained another rare cultivation genius. So, my talent is much higher than that of my three sons. Back then I could not even withstand the baptism of the blue sea essence, let alone them. Hearing this, Yan Zhuoxing immediately said respectfully, "The Demon Lord is too modest. If Yan Zhuoxing had the ability of the Demon Lord, he wouldn't have been destroyed by that traitor Yu Qianqiu back then. You don't have to flatter me." The Devil King of Qing Tian's gaze looked outside the tall palace gate and said with a faint smile, "You are different. Since you were able to endure the pain and torture of the 7-star blood-stabbing art, you are qualified to enjoy the baptism of the blue sea essence. Otherwise, Lord Demon God would not have secretly protected you in the divine realm. Furthermore, you are now the Vice Palace Lord of my Demon Palace and the next Devil King's successor. No matter which aspect, you are more qualified to enjoy the baptism of the blue sea essence than my 3 sons. So you don't have to delay it anymore. Otherwise you will be hypocritical. Let's be honest with each other. There is no need to be so polite." "Yes." Yan Zhuoxing replied respectfully. Suddenly, he felt that Eunuch Li seemed to be secretly observing him. When he raised his head, he saw that Eunuch Li was slightly lowering his head and not moving at all. The feeling just now seemed to be an illusion. In the illusory immortal city, in an empty shop, Yu Qianqiu and Nong Zhu stood behind the open window and looked at the dense crowd in the central square at the foot of the mountain. At this moment, the entire illusory immortal city was occupied by rogue cultivators from all directions. It was impossible to count how many people there were. It was said that the Heartless Palace had gathered 2 to 3 million rogue cultivators here. The External Affairs Commander under the former immortal Emperor Jin Tai, the current Vice Palace Lord of the Heartless Palace, Wu Xiong, was floating in the air. He was giving an impassioned speech to the countless people below, enticing the rogue cultivators from all over the world to seize the opportunity to make contributions. In short, he gave a lot of temptations that those rogue cultivators who were used to suffering couldn't resist. Wu Xiong's rhythmic voice echoed in the sky. Behind him were many disciples of the Heartless Palace. As Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and stared at Wu Xiong, Nong Zhu, who was beside him, suddenly sent him a telepathic message and sighed, "Even I am a little tempted after hearing it. I can't wait to follow the Heartless Palace and have a bright future. Unfortunately, I have already boarded your pirate ship." Her words seemed to be teasing him, reminding him that he often did such bewitching things. Yu Qianqiu acted as if he didn't hear it. He coldly snorted and replied, "They are just a group of people who gathered in a hurry. Wang Qing hasn't appeared yet. Can Wu Xiong lead them to stop the invasion of the demon realm?" Believing in such nonsense is asking for trouble. When they wake up from their dream, I hope Wu Xiong can still lead the Heartless Palace to advance and retreat with them. At this moment, the neighing of countless war horses came from high up in the sky. Everyone looked up and saw rolling black clouds coming from the horizon. Not long later, they saw countless shadow cavalry riding on heavenly horses that were spitting green flames as they flew across the sky. Countless horse hooves were faintly discernible in the black fog. The shadow cavalry was like a long dragon, its head could not be seen in front and its tail could not be seen at the back. When it passed overhead, a huge pressure caused everyone below to keep quiet out of fear. The momentum was very terrifying, no one had ever seen such a formation before. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.